Starting the stream. Did we do it? Are we here? We made it. Yes, we did. Oh, hope you all are having a beautiful time. Hope everything's going beautifully for you. I'm definitely having just like a bleary-eyed. I had a day off, so I just slept in. Feel like when I'm doing my normal capitalist gig, it's like I never really get to sleep. You're always just like either dealing with capitalism or coming down from capitalism. You get like a little moment of time to yourself. And I don't know, there's something like you don't really want to go to bed because there's just this sense of looming dread that like, oh, we're marching back towards it. Here we go. Another day wasted doing this capitalist bullshit or recovering from this capitalist bullshit. You're never actually like living living a life that's your own, right? Yeah, and not really. Well, today I wanted to start. For those of you who are still walking around pretending like capitalism has any value whatsoever, we got an article. It's from the Maple. It's to augment the one I was talking about yesterday. 42% of Ontario condos are used as investment properties. Hey, Ligon Disease, how you doing, bud? Yesterday I was reading an article from the CBC. More than 86% of London's apartment condos are owned by investors. That's well above the average. But the average is still 42%. So it's almost 1 in 2, right? It's almost 1 in 2 of properties here in the province of Ontario are being used as investment properties. Anemone, Kea, that guy, radio, grinning, oh well. Grinning says he's got a TikTok ad. China loves you. I hope so. I love China. I got no reason. This is the thing that I think is so blisteringly strange about how we act in this society. Like, why do we hate other countries? Like, why do we hate other people? Like, what's the point of it? Especially like a place like China. There's so much to love about China. China's got such a rich and beautiful history. And the people there are so interesting and doing such wonderful things. I don't know why we're so dedicated to despising other countries instead of looking at them and being like, oh, well, what are they up to? What are they doing? How are they operating in the world? What are they doing some successful things? And honestly, if we took a look at China, we'd find out pretty quickly. And if we were honest about it, if we got out of this goddamn ridiculous, like, oh, China's sending over a balloon. The balloon story, I for sure thought that balloon story was going to go away right away. Breaking news from the New York Times. Breaking news. The Chinese balloon shot down by the U.S. could collect communication signals and was part of a global fleet, the State Department said. It has been trying to make balloons more durable, harder to detect, and even serve as platforms for advanced weapons. Like, we're an extremely unserious people. Like, this balloon story is just standing out, without a doubt, as this, like, look at how completely unserious we are as a people. Like, if you're seriously trying to tell me that there's anything to this balloon story, this is like some QAnon shit. Like, this is some QAnon shit. This is where we're at with this. That U.S. government psyop propaganda is just QAnon for liberals. Be very afraid of the Chinese. They fly balloons that are like 500 feet tall and also carry a payload the size of an airliner, which is full of WMDs. Average Biden voter nods. That's terrifying and also 100% believable. Like, we are not serious as a people. The only reason we are serious at all is because we are terrifying. So we're like a big, gigantic monster with huge amounts of weapons. And like, if Godzilla started to talk about like welfare funding, we'd probably be like, probably not Godzilla, but we'd still take him seriously because he can knock over our fucking shit. Like, and that's basically us. Sounds like a warped Stephen King novel. Yeah, I mean, I've always said that our culture is like a parody culture from Rick and Morty. That's more or less my opinion of our culture. That like Rick and Morty would like go to an alternative dimension or like go through one of these portals and they'd end up, oh wow, it's a universe where people are think that weather balloons are problems. Like it's we're just like the dumbest, thickest people that have ever existed, and we should be just routinely made fun of because of how fucking ridiculous we are. Yeah, Bad Empanada. Yeah, that quote that I just said to you guys was from a fellow by the name of Empanada. He lives in Argentina. I don't always agree with everything he says, but I think he's an ally, so he tries his best, and I figure, hey, what the hell? What the hell, eh? Like... man. And in the meantime, while we're dealing with this ridiculous balloon shit, all of our housing is being bought up. Like, I'm astounded at this point. Like, at this point, it really is just like, oh, we are really dumb. Like, we really, really find stupidity to be pleasurable, I think. Like, 42% of our housing here in the province of Ontario, 42% of it is being used as investment properties. This isn't even including Airbnbs in the conversation, right? This isn't including any of this. This is literally just properties that are held empty because I can turn around and swap them out. Like, anybody who is sitting here saying that this is a reasonable thing that's completely rational, well, they earned it, you know, they earned it. Like, we're dumb as fuck. Like, we're so far behind the 8 ball here. And while this is happening, we're literally throwing people into the streets. Like, at what point do we become a serious people? At what point do we actually just demand that this end? And say, like, there shouldn't be a housing market. Like, what are you talking about? A market for housing? Like, you want to commodify housing and make it so that rich people can literally just hold on to empty properties while we literally throw people into the streets. Like, I just think that, like, we're either stupid or we're just dramatically evil. And probably both. Probably both. And the people who are defending this system, like the people who are actually trying to defend this system of capital, like, they're just sacrificing their souls, basically. That if there is such a thing as an afterlife, you're just marching yourself into the pit of hell, basically, so that some rich guy can go to Jeffrey Epstein's island. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to live in this world right now. When, like, the solution's right in front of your face, right? Take properties that are empty away from these worthless, pathetic capitalists and give them to people who need them. Like, do away with this absurdist nonsense. Well, they earned it. They earned it. Like, do away with this dumb, reduced, like, barely sentient nonsense. And admit that homeless people are still citizens. They live in your neighborhoods. They are trying to get back out of the hole that our society has put them in. And you know what would be a great way to do it? Give them houses. Let them have them. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, John, that's going to collapse the housing market. Good. I hope it does. We shouldn't have a housing market. There should be no such thing as a housing market. That the very idea and the concept of a market that is based on housing, on a housing market, is evil on the outset. You are fundamentally saying some people just don't deserve houses. Some people just don't deserve a place to live. That's fundamentally what you're saying by even suggesting the existence of a housing market. And I don't tolerate it. I think that it's evil. I don't want to live in a society that's betraying itself so obviously and overtly. I don't see any reason for anyone to tolerate it, outside of Nazis, obviously, who tolerate all kinds of things. Yet there's a house on my street that's sold and has been vacant for 3 months. I really stopped and looked at it for a minute today. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Like, the more you see it, the more you think about it. Unless you're completely bought into the idea that money, like, unless you worship money, right? Like, if you're a person who worships money and money is your god, and you've just turned off your capacity for empathy, compassion, rational thinking, or any of that, and you just worship money for the sake of worshiping money, then it's obviously absurd. Like, what's the point? And like, it, the thing that I've been really thinking about this last little while is, like, we keep seeing these absurdities rise in our culture and in our society. We keep seeing these stories coming out where not only are the poor getting poorer, right? You can see here, I've got a chart up. This is from the OECD. America's poor are worse off than elsewhere. The thing that really matters is the 25 country average, right? Their overall ranking is 10.7, and the United States 17.8. Like, the poverty gap is much wider than the 25 country average across the United States. And we keep seeing these stories. We keep seeing these stories of how the rich keep getting bailed out. I've got a story here, for God's sakes, where COVID blank check report finds large corporations spent billions on dividends and share buybacks while receiving government wage subsidies. So literally, they took the government wage subsidies, so your tax dollars, right? We're supposed to really care about taxpayers, right? So they took your tax dollars, and corporations just used it, not on for wage subsidies, but to buy shares and dividends for themselves. We just keep seeing these types of stories where the rich actively betray the poor, where there's this enormous transfer of wealth, and then we're told to accept it. We're just told to maintain the system, right? And it's like, eventually people are just going to start stealing things, and they're right to do so, in my opinion. That, like, there's no rules, like, there's no law. Like, what are you talking about? That the laws don't really exist. They exist only to oppress the underclass. So we're not really beholden to them, honestly. And eventually this attitude is going to become the common attitude, because it's just getting obvious that the rulers are not interested in building a society or a civilization of any sort. They're interested in plundering as much wealth as they possibly can, and then abandon the people that they can't plunder any longer. And that's what we're facing. And it's just getting more and more aggressive and more obvious that that's the case. And the people who are the defenders of the capitalist system are just becoming more and more ludicrous and childish in the way that they think and the way that they talk, right? Like, I think that the most effective thing that's ever happened from a propaganda standpoint is that people obviously are triggered by the word communism. They think communism, and they think, oh God, it's the gulags and all this kind of stuff, and they just, like, don't understand that what they're living in right now is far worse than what was happening in any communist society at any time, outside of the, full-scale Nazi invasion. But capitalists do what capitalists do. French, good to see you, bud. Good evening. Did you watch the United States State of the Union address? No, I didn't waste my time with that theater. I've been seeing clips of it here, there, and everywhere. Like, it's interesting theater. I mean, that's for sure. It's not relevant to anything, but it's, Biden stands up and says, oh, we really care about poor people, and my Republican guys they want to get rid of Social Security. Oh my God, the whole thing. Yeah, like, the Democrats want to get rid of Social Security. They're just trying to find a way to dance around it to make sure that when it happens, it gets pinned on the Republicans, right? That's all. Yeah, Republicans booing made it funny. Like, if you're in for theater, like, if you're interested in watching, like, the sort of vanity project of American politics, like, I'll say it again and again, that being a congressperson or a senator or the president, like, or any of these people, it's strictly vanity projects, right? You are doing the bidding of the ownership class. That's all you're there for. And if that structure didn't exist in order to do that for the ruling class, then the ruling class would create one and get rid of the one that wasn't doing that. Like, that's the structure of the piece. And yeah, like don't get me wrong, like I thought it was like from the clips I've been catching here, there, and everywhere. Like it's interesting theater. Like it's theater that's central at the heart of the culture, but it's not really relevant to the outcome of what's happening in the society. Like they all work for the same people, you know. Like that's all it is. That they all work for the same people, and the like Biden is just trying to protect his legacy. Like these guys, that's all they really care about at the end of the day. Is like how is the society going to view me? Do I get a statue? I'm the president. I get a statue, right? Like that's all they really care about. But like Biden is just as bad as any of those Republicans. Like any of them, pick any of them. Like he's just as bad as any of those guys. Like his tenure as a senator, like for God's sakes, like he wrote the crime bill. Like I like the reason why the prison industrial complex is as it is because of people like Joe Biden. So this idea that somehow the Republicans and the Democrats are somehow opposed to one another in any meaningful way, like I just think that you got to kind of be duping yourself at this point. Like we need to be abandoning these parties back because they have abandoned us a long time ago. Like, and this idea that like, oh, we should go vote and put all our energy in and pay all attention to this dead corpse that's shambling around. Like, you should be putting your energy into literally anything else. Literally anything else would be better off than voting for these frauds. Yeah. I just can't believe people are so deluded they think that they are motivated to tax the rich and that it would even work. Well, I mean, French, if you tune into this channel for any length of time, you'll find out that, like, my opinion is more or less that they'll be forced to do it. Like, they'll be forced to do it eventually, right? Like, they're when the dollar collapses on the international stage and they're going to be forced to try to find capital, they won't be able to pull any more money out of the poor and the disabled and the middle, quote-unquote middle class that doesn't really exist. So they'll be forced. They won't have an option, right? So they'll be forced to say, okay, we're going to raise taxes on the rich, and then the rich are going to abandon them. Like, that's the trajectory that we're on. Like, they're not going to all pull together and try to build a strong America. Like, these people have never tried to build a strong America, ever, in, like, in the history of neoliberalism from the 80s. And they've been very upfront about it. Like, that's the part about it that's kind of crazy to me about this, is that, like, it took me a long time to put this together because when you're a kid, you believe in kid shit, right? And you think like a little kid and you're naive. But you get older and you kind of see what's what, and you start to understand, like, these people are real psychopaths, like real, actual, walking around psychopath, lizard-brained, I need to rape children psychopaths. And you begin to put this together, and you realize, like, yeah, they've been telling you to your face since the very outset and the very beginning that their goal is to destroy the country, rip it apart, impoverish the nation, deindustrialize, ensure that no one has any tools to actually recover from anything, to plunge everybody into poverty and unemployment, and make off with the bag. With the excuse of, well, it'll trickle down because we'll bestow upon you these kind of blah-de-blah, the kind of kid shit that only a little kid can believe, right? And, well, now it's a period where we've got to actually grow up, right? We've actually got to grow up, and because we're going to hit the brick wall. Like, we're hitting the brick wall. It's written in the stars at this point. Like, I don't think it's avoidable. And once that starts to happen, the billionaire class is going to say of the federal government, well, I'm not going to be taxed. And so what are they going to do? Well, people like Elon Musk are going to be like, oh, we'll just declare independence in Texas. We'll declare independence in California. I was talking about this all last night. Like, the balkanization of the United States is coming. The billionaire class will absolutely be at the forefront of it. They will gather up the, like, lunatic libertarian side of the argument and start fomenting independence movements, and some of them will be successful. Like, because the libertarian side of the conversation, and frankly most centrists and conservatives, are like, yeah, I don't want to pay taxes any longer. What am I getting for this? And the answer is obviously nothing. And the billionaires aren't going to be interested in paying taxes, and so they're going to, oh, okay, we'll all get together and declare independence, say F off, federal government. What are you even doing for us? There'll probably be some kind of internal civil war. And this is the trajectory we're on, and in the meantime, we're all bickering about a balloon. What a completely unserious people we are. And I think the thing that's sort of got it written all in the stars is that our ruling class is incompetent. Desperately incompetent. Not interested in governing. That's what's really interesting about what's going on today, is that everybody's like, the government's the problem. Well, the reason why the government's the problem is because we have a government that's disinterested in governing. Joe Biden puts forward a $10,000 student loan, the most tepid, small scale, little itty, tiny, teensy little reform to the failed system, and everybody's losing their mind about it. And it's just that would be called governing. That's what a government would actually do, is that they would govern. And we're so committed to the failure of our society. We're so committed to this idea that we should absolutely careen as fast as possible towards a total collapse. Because they earned it. Because people earned it. This babyish, low-level brain thinking. And we got to commit to the hierarchy, climb the meritocracy, all that kind of stuff. And it's all going to collapse. It's going to collapse into fucking ash and dust. And we don't have an industrial base. Our dollar is going to be worthless. And it's the Canadian and American people that are going to be left holding the bag. They're just going to be told, yeah, go fuck yourselves. We're going to take off to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Maybe sell us your kid. Yeah, Canada's government functions like a high school cafeteria. Wow, high school. That's really advanced. I think that we're far more regressed than high school. Good to see you, Serge. I swear I watch the videos of what goes on in the Canadian Parliament, and you'll see them arguing and bickering about Canadian freedom and enterprise. Yeah, because it's all just showmanship, right? It's all just chest thumping. That's all it is. Because at the end of the day, they just want to be elected again. And so what you're fundamentally seeing in the Canadian Parliament, and it's true in the American Parliament too, what you're fundamentally seeing is when you go I'm going to write a letter. I'm writing a letter to the Parliament, blah, 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 right? So they take your thing and they take out all the buzzwords, right? They take out all the buzzwords and all of this, and buzzwords are trigger words, right? They're the things that really make you perk your ears and sit up and actually be oh, interesting. They said the thing that I say. And they basically make a collage of it, right? You can see comedians make fun of this. Family Guy makes fun of this, right? Where you just stand up there and you go, freedom, democracy, America. Enterprise and free enterprise for democracy in America and liberty, truth, and justice. 9/11. For freedom, fight the terrorists. We can't let the terrorists win. Freedom, democracy, enterprise for everybody. God bless America. And people are oh! Because it doesn't matter what you say. Right? You're just trying to get just enough votes to maintain your position of power, right? To just stay in office. You don't care about doing anything for these people, right? You don't actually give a shit about these people. You just want something from them, and they want their votes. And so the way to do it is to just say back to them the thing they said to you. We really care about climate change. I really care about climate change. We got to do something about climate change. We have to do something about climate change. It is how psychopaths work. You say something and they say it back to you, right? And then, oh, wow, this guy's really smart. He says all the things that I say. And it's just so that they can hang out with billionaires and become a billionaire buddy. That's it. That's their whole objective from start to finish. So, and you could really see it. You can really see it if you actually watch these parliamentarians argue with one another. they're just taking letters from like their constituents and saying my constituents are saying this and I concur. So congratulations, you're gonna win. You're gonna get voted in. Hey Mox, how you doing, bud? Yeah, French says if it wasn't privatized, they could just absorb those debts, but they made it semi-privatized in order to enrich cronies. Yeah, the student loan. Yeah, but they could still nationalize it. Like it's well within their power. Like this is the thing that's so embarrassing about what's going on. Is like so much of this. Like the solution is obviously nationalization. Like the solution is so obviously nationalization, and they're just refusing to do it because that doesn't make my buddies rich, and it's as simple as that. And I don't know why we pretend like something else is going on. Everyone just criticizes Trudeau. Yeah, well, of course. Like Trudeau's the icon, right? Like he's the prime minister. He's the guy who's supposed to be responsible for everything, even though he just literally reads cue cards. Like that's Trudeau's legacy. He just takes cue cards from the industry that he's technically supposed to be quote unquote regulating, reads the cue card, right? Enacts the policy that they themselves give him. And that's all he's ever done, and that's all he's ever going to do. Like, take a look at the effort to privatize the healthcare system, right? That the provinces are moving to privatize the healthcare system, and then Trudeau is coming out and being like, we're going to give money to the provinces to bolster the healthcare system. And everybody's going, oh, wow, Trudeau, you're so clever and smart and interesting. He's literally giving money to the provinces so that they can privatize. Like, where do you think that money's not going to go to nurses? It's not going to go to doctors, right? It's not going to go to a hospital. It's not going to build up the productive capacity of the public healthcare system. It's going to go into the pockets of the billionaire class. That's what it's going to do. That's the whole point. And when they all get together in the same room, it's not like Trudeau is going like, now don't you use this money for privatization. Like, get completely fucked. Get completely fucked. Pierre Poilievre plus Scheer are like veterans, ethics, and the pipeline. I don't know. I don't understand your comment, but yeah, I'm gonna read some cue cards. Yeah, like that's all he is. He's just a froofy haired haircut, a froofy haircut with the name Trudeau slapped on it. Like literally, if they could just cart out like a squawk box, just like that had like Trudeau's haircut on it, and people would accept that, then it would be no different. Like that's literally all it is. He's just reading cue cards from the fossil fuel industry. The whole carbon tax idea, like the carbon tax was straight up from the fossil fuel industry. They were just like, yeah, we really care about reducing emissions, so we're gonna put a tax on consumers while, you want to give us $1 billion in bailouts? Fantastic. Like, it's so obviously a grift, but again, we love grifters. We love grifters. We're way too stupid to understand that we're being grifted as a people. We love being grifted. It's like watching a magic trick, you know? Like when you watch a magic trick, you're fundamentally watching a liar. Right? Like, that's what magic is it's deceiving people and lying to them. But there's, like, this whole aspect of consent. And so when the trick happens, you know you've been deceived, and yet you're like, oh, I was deceived so cleverly. Oh, what a great magic trick, right? And politics is the same, right? Our entire culture is like this now, where it's like, we're like, oh, wow, he said the words that he said. I know he doesn't believe it, but I like that he said it. And, oh, he lied to me so effectively. Oh, it's that same kind of thing that's going on. And it just seems like we're here for it. You know, we love the idea that our children are going to live in squalor. We love the idea that our dollar is going to collapse. We love the idea that we're going to go overseas and murder a bunch of people for no reason. Like, we love this stuff. We're super here for it. French says, even as a libertarian, I would vastly prefer single-payer healthcare to ACA. Pitched as the best of both worlds, actually the worst part of both worlds. Well, the libertarian argument to me is so stupid when it comes to healthcare. There are hundreds of examples of single-payer healthcare systems working and being successful. The libertarian idea of how to dispense healthcare is extraordinarily radical experimental and untested. Their entire theory of how it would work has never been tried, and even in theory collapses into total failure. And yet we're going to, instead of use the system that works, that we know works, especially during a healthcare crisis, instead of using the system that does work, that we can see right in front of us, we're gonna use some experimental idea amidst a crisis. Like it couldn't. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that we're proud of our stupidity. We love how dumb we are, and we're gonna pay for it pretty heavily, if you ask me. Yo, seems extremely Canadian tonight. Well, this is the Canadian commie content. I know that you Americans are used to being the center of attention. Mocked says Canadians in their igloos built atop the mass graves of indigenous children. But what about the poor Uyghurs? Yeah, exactly. I have actually decided that I'm no longer going to engage in the whole Uyghur genocide narrative. Like I'm just not, because it's completely unserious, and it's obvious that it's unserious. We have been in this process of like bombing Muslims for like 40 years in front of everybody constantly. We're gonna freedom and terrorism and get after the and all that kind of like literally like in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria. We like have been just like massacring and swathing through, like blood covering our face, screeching at the highest possible level, just carpet bombing the shit out of Muslims. And then we point into China and go like, oh, the poor little Uyghurs, and that's supposed to be fucking serious. Like, shut the fuck up. What an embarrassing thing to say. Like, even if you did think that that was a problem, even if you actually looked at that and were like, oh yeah, the Uyghur thing, right? Well, okay, how about the Muslims you've been actively massacring through a massive, like, military campaign for the last 30 years? No, not interested in that? Oh, interesting. How... You must be a serious, credible intellectual, for sure. Someone I should definitely pay any attention to whatsoever, right? Ugh. Yeah, true, never been tried, also doesn't work. Is everyone entitled to state-of-the-art everything? Well, I mean, like... No, like, the libertarian ethos is basically, we need to fight for our freedom to sell ourselves to wage slavery. That's basically what they're saying. And it's just, like, dumb on the face of it. That, like, we need to maximize our freedom to sell ourselves to corporations. Sell ourselves to corporations. Sell ourselves to corporations. That's what freedom means. You got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work real hard to get a skill so you can really appeal to your oppressors and make sure that you'll be the one that gets the kiss on the forehead. Like that's basically what they're arguing for. It's quite embarrassing. Like it's really embarrassing that this has become something of a grassroots movement. That they're like, I understand why big corporate power and politicians would try to espouse this thing, but like why would any worker anywhere be like, yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to sell yourselves to wage slavery. That's what true freedom means. Like, we're Americans. Yeah, acknowledge me. Yeah, no one is worse than America, to be honest. I mean, that's just factually the case. I take offense as an American for lacking attention. Yeah. Everyone should be entitled to a dignified material condition to be able to contribute and participate into a grander community. Has it ever struck you all as to how antisocial it is to let your roads go in disrepair? Yeah, absolutely. Ugh. Why are billionaires more special than anyone else? Shouldn't we all have access to the same healthcare? Yeah. Like, we should have access to the same healthcare. Like, that's just the truth of it. That, like, the whole argument of, like, oh, we should have a two-tiered, why shouldn't a person be able to pay, is, like, literally, like, well, why shouldn't a king be able to just step over the backs of the peasants? Like, that guy, hey John, what would you say is the main differentiator between socialism and communism? It's absolute egalitarian nature with total government ownership. I'm trying to figure out where I land here. I mean, socialism is the path to communism, right? Like that socialism and communism are actually linked to one another. Like if you think about it, like there's capitalism and then socialism and then communism, and that there is like a gradient that exists between these. And the concept, like the core concept of socialism is the idea that the workers own the businesses they work in. That's really what makes socialism socialism. And there is this constant sort of gradient push. That's why things like unions, right, minimum wages, anything that benefits the working class are generally talked about as if they are socialism. When the whole idea of socialism is that workers own the means of production, that workers are the ones that actually make the decisions within the places that they work in. And communism is a move in to make a stateless, moneyless society. Like it's that, and religiousless society as well. That you move in this direction. Yeah. Communism is stateless, moneyless socialism. Yeah, that's not a bad way of thinking about it. And like this is why I don't really go hard in the paint for people who are like, well, I just consider myself a socialist. I'm just like, okay, like it seems to me like it's a move in the correct direction, right? You're moving away from this principle of communism that says there should be and I also think that socialists generally like are fine with the idea that like workers own the means of production, but it's also fine that there are still capitalists, you know? Like socialists will still be, oh yeah, but like this worthless parasitical group of psychopaths should still exist and are still valuable somehow. Whereas communists are like, no, like that this group should not exist. They should go away. Like bye, right? And that to me is typically the major difference. That like a socialist is somebody who kind of considers themselves like we should reform the system, perhaps move away from it in this kind of thing, but like we can still negotiate with these capitalists. Where a communist is just like, no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be negotiating with these guys. Like these guys are psychos. We should definitely flush them down the toilet of history. We should remove their assets. We should strip them of their wealth. We should remove them from, we should deplatform them. We should make it so that they are not able to participate in civil life anymore. We should tell them to get a job, and we should use the assets that they're hoarding to force us all into wage slavery for the benefit of the people. That's what we should do. Whereas I think a socialist would be like, oh, well, that's a bit extreme. And I'm like, nah, I don't actually consider that to be extreme. The most extreme position to me seems we should allow these people to continue existing. Like, if there was somebody in your society who was going around with a gun just shooting people, and somebody said we should stop that person from shooting that person, and then somebody said seems extreme, I would assume that those two were working together. Like, that's more or less my position on this. That these capitalists have shown over and 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 over again that they're psychopathic. And we should definitely remove them from all power. Like, they shouldn't have things. They shouldn't own property. The question of whether or not they should be able to freely walk around the society and even talk to people is on the table as far as I'm concerned. Like, these people are monsters. And we're just like, yeah, they earned it. They definitely earned it. Definitely. Uh-huh. Like, just crazy. Compton says, it's just a solid fact everyone uses the roads. We live and die on it, and yet we let that shit get out of hand. Crumbling bridges and shitty power infrastructure is suicidal society. Yeah, but not everybody does use those roads. Like, the rich don't use those roads, right? The rich have jets. They don't use those. They have helicopters. They're not using those roads. They don't give a fuck about your roads. Like, I don't know what it's going to take for people to really realize that these people do not give a shit about building a society. They've been saying it to you all along. Like literally Thatcher said there's no such thing as society. Like they outright are going to tell you again, like if they can get away with like getting rid of libraries, getting rid of security, getting rid of Medicaid, getting rid of the universal healthcare system, they absolutely fucking will. They absolutely 100 fucking percent will. And they will watch you die in the streets and curl up their lip and think you're dingy. Oh, the dingy poor while it happens. Like, I don't know what it's going to have to take for people to recognize that these people are not your friends or your buddies. They're not interested in building a civil society. They're interested in hoarding resources so that when you collapse into poverty and you're forced to sell yourself to them. That's the whole deal. That's the whole arrangement, and they know it. Like, I just don't know what it's going to have to take for people to actually put like one and one together and be like, I guess one and one doesn't equal potato. I guess it does actually equal two. But if you actually present the problem to somebody, 1 + 1 is, they go, oh, what are you think you're smarter than me, eh? Well, because we're all proud of how stupid we are. Thank you for the explanation. I'm trying to bring my wife to the dark side. Well, we're not the dark side. Like, we would be the rebellion. That's my favorite part about modern culture. Like, you've got all of these like libertarian conservative types being like, Luke Skywalker's the greatest. I really like that Star Wars movie. And like, Star Wars is like a heavy critique of US imperialism. It's like a massive critique of US imperialism. And yet you've got all these imperialists being like, yeah, we're gonna fight the stormtroopers. Like, it's wild to see how completely shut off everybody's brains actually are. I'm like going really hard in the paint about how stupid we are, but boy, howdy do I feel it today. Boy, howdy do I feel it today, guys. I gotta tell you, like, just like the pride of our stupidity. Like, we are so happy to be this stupid, and what we're doing is so stupid. Like, and over and over and over again, we just see these obvious, clear, like right in front of our examples. Right in front of our face examples of how the wealthy and the powerful are extracting as much wealth from us and then abandoning us. Like, there was a $2 trillion transfer of wealth that happened over the pandemic. Like, and it's obvious. And yet we're all just like, Elon Musk works hard and he's a super genius, man. Like Santa is real. Like, that's where we're at as a people. And the collapses that are coming, like, we super deserve them. Like, we're super setting ourselves up for them. And we've just like worked so hard for them. Like, we've worked so hard to ensure that they would happen. And we're completely disinterested in trying to fix it or make it better or build any kind of unifying structure or build any kind of unifying idea, right? That our unifying idea is, let's go to war with it, right? That can you imagine if we did like a war on poverty, right? We might actually get something done. But we're not going to go to war against things that really matter, right? Like, when we do a war on something, we got to make money from the exploitation of the poor somehow. Like the war on drugs, which literally the people who started the war on drugs have admitted that the point of it was to break up black culture and break up hippie culture. They've literally come out on record and said and admitted to it and confessed that the entire idea behind the war on drugs was to allow us to destroy black organizations. Like, that's the reason why they did it. And yet there are still people in the society who are like, marijuana is a scourge of the devil. If you get the devil's weed and you smoke the devil's weed, and you're just as bad. Excuse me while I drink a glass of whiskey and smoke this here cigar and then maybe drink some coffee, but marijuana will send you into hell. Like, just crazy. If you haven't seen Andor, it's a great series. I actually have. I haven't seen Andor, but I have access to Andor. I just haven't been able to bring myself to actually sit down and watch it because I don't think that. I don't really value our culture very much, and like Star Wars culture especially. I'm sitting on it because I'm like, is this actually a thing? Right? Like, is this actually a thing? Is the culture actually going to catch on to this Andor thing? Or is this just like a flash in the pan and people are going to forget it like we always do? We have a persistent cultural amnesia. Like, we literally forgot about the Ukraine war because Chris Rock got slapped, you know? And we don't really care about things anymore. And like, we as a culture have kind of like stagnated. Like, we're a stagnant culture. We've stagnated into like remakes of remakes of remakes. Like, we're sequel heavy. Everything's like the cinematic universe, because how dare we actually come up with new ideas and new thoughts, right? And so we've just stagnated as a culture. And the reason why we can't make new stuff is because all the new stuff is heavily critical of capitalism. Like, that's like the truth. Like, the new stuff that's come out has been like, well, like Harry Potter, which is basically like, let's take down wizard Nazis, right? And then you've got like the Hunger Games, which is like an excoriation of the system of capital and how capital collapses into oligarchy, and I just think the capitalist class is kind of glomming onto it and kind of getting aware that, like, oh shit, like, if we allow new media to be produced, it's all going to be like, we are the Nazis and we're going to be called the Nazis. And in the future, people will understand that, like, the American Empire was easily as bad as the Third Reich, if not worse. And people are going to understand that. Like, that's why the Republicans are working so hard against this CRT stuff. Because they know that if the history of America is actually taught in schools, that they'll end up having to defend themselves to their own children. That their own children are going to be like, dude, this is brutal. Like, this is crazy. Like, why? How is this able to persist? Because the people who are enacting things like slavery and the people who are enacting this kind of stuff, they understand that they don't have a leg to stand on. Like, you can't rape a child and then think you're morally good. Like, that's not real. And so they know, like, and they know what would happen if the public understood, and they know that would happen to any of this kind of stuff. But none of it's going to come out, because we have to ensure that we, like, destroy the arts and destroy the artist. Because if the culture actually recognizes and realizes that, oh, we're the evil bad guys, like, we're the bad guys, like, we're the empire, for sure, we're the empire, like, it's not close. Then maybe somebody will be like, hey, why does this guy have wealth, power, or money whatsoever? He's literally a slaver. Like, so they got to make sure that nobody even understands this stuff. So when I take a look at something like Andor, I'm like, is it actually going to matter? Like, I just don't care about Star Wars anymore. It's just so fucking meaningless now. Just garbage upon garbage. But Andor keeps floating up, because I think people are like, no, this one was actually decent. So I don't know. Maybe I'll bite the bullet. Right-wing libertarians are imperials because they want to continue capitalism. It's a hierarchical system, but they deceive themselves that both freedom and capital can exist. Yeah. Well, the whole libertarian idea, I was just saying it. Like, the whole libertarian idea. We should be free to sell ourselves to capitalists. That's the whole libertarian idea. That true freedom means selling yourself to an owner. That's what true freedom is. Drones are going to be policing us in no time. Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I think that's probably already happening. Like, they're probably already using drones for surveillance. They're probably already using drones for this sort of stuff. Like, it's when that robot dog hits the streets. That's when I think it's going to be, like, fairly obvious that it's not cool that there's a robot dog walking around with police. It's just that's how you know your police are no longer interested in working. They're no longer, like, to serve and protect. They're literally an oppressive imperialist force at that point. And the people who will pretend otherwise, I just think, are dim-witted. Don't tread on me, serve the wealthy more than the poor. Yeah. Someday I'll own this boot. Yeah. It's like that Futurama meme, right? Like, Fry, why are you booing the poor? You're not rich. But someday I will be, and then those poor people better watch out. Yeah. I can't believe they're still talking about the balloon, saying it's a threat. Not only are they still talking about it, they're ramping it up. They're ramping it up. I was just talking about it, Isaac. Like, unbelievable how dumb this is. Gotta watch the first 3 episodes of Andor all at the same time. It picks up the pace after that. I don't know why, like, I don't know why television shows are like this now. Where it's literally like, yeah, the first few episodes are just going to be absolute trash. And then maybe we'll do something. Like, do you know what would happen in, like, Shakespearean times if you tried to do that? You literally would have fruit thrown at you. That the peasantry class during the Shakespearean era, literally they would be sold rotten fruit while going into the theater. And if the play that they were shown sucked, they would start throwing fruit at the actors. Like this idea that we're we'll do 3 episodes of it and it'll be real slow and we'll set it all up. Boo! Boo! Like, and then they would play Macbeth. So, that guy, I just realized the movie Up is actually Chinese propaganda meant to normalize globe-trotting balloons that are in fact weapons of mass destruction. That's right. We're all supposed to look at balloons and think of happy things, like a child holding a balloon. Balloons at a birthday party. I remember when balloons were seen as celebratory. That was just Chinese propaganda to make sure that we would look at a balloon unsuspectingly. Now we see balloons for what they are. A tool of the Chinese communists come to take us all over. Like, right-wing libertarianism makes sense in Minecraft, but not even. Like, but not even. Yeah, like, as long as you ignore that there are larger systems. I think that's actually the most dangerous thing that comes out of the libertarian right, is the denial of the existence of systems. There's a huge segment of libertarians who just, like, ignore the fact that there's a Federal Reserve, a Congress, a Senate, just everything is everyone voluntarily trading with one another. Like, what about these big giant institutions? Oh, well, never mind that. Like, just shut your brain off. You're an NPC, like, basically espousing an NPC ideology. If you work hard, you'll be rewarded. Hey, yuck. Yeah, or not engaged in voluntary agreements. Ever heard of the Pullman strikes? That's the result of right-wing libertarians. Yes, peasants, talk about the balloon while we steal your health care. Voluntary agreements are bunk when some billionaire owns all the land and they can make the rules. Sure, you can go to some other place where another billionaire owns all the land. That's freedom! Yeah. You can't have libertarianism and bourgeois ownership at the same time. Content. God damn, I could eat some pizza. Yeah, we could all eat some pizza. So, let's pivot a little bit from the doom and gloom. Let's pivot a little bit from this and talk about some good news that's happening. So February 9th, is that today? Today, February 9th. How about that? So today, February 9th at 11 a.m., there was supposedly a walkout of the NBC newsroom. In 3 years of bargaining our first contract, NBC News has repeatedly broken the law, cutting union salaries and conducting layoffs behind closed doors without bargaining. But the newsroom doesn't run without us. So even the media empires themselves are starting to face these walkouts and starting to see strike actions happening. And then in other good news, renewables will be the world's top electricity source within 3 years. IEA data reveals. Yeah, Mr. Moon, why the fuck aren't we all walking out? Yeah, I ask myself that basically every day. Like, I don't see any reason to participate in this society. Like, that's my favorite thing to say to these people who are like, just get a better job. Just get a better job. What's the point of participating in this society? Like, we're actively destroying ourselves. We're obviously facing total collapses that you got to be real, like, dim-witted to think are not happening. Like you've got enormous, massive multinational corporate entities as well as nonprofit entities, like the OECD saying that we're heading into like decades long of recessions. Like we're obviously being plundered. We're obviously being pilfered. Like I genuinely feel like I'm like in on a boat that's being boarded by pirates, and the captain is saying, everyone just needs to work harder swabbing the decks. Like that's genuinely how I feel about it. And it's like, boy howdy, do we ever need a mutiny? Like, do we ever need to get a captain in who's like, oh, there are pirates? Like, we really need some leadership who's actually acknowledging the scale of the crisis. But the problem is that all our leadership are part of the pirate crew. Like, that's the hard truth of it. That we're being boarded by pirates and our captain is in cahoots with them. So of course he's like, just keep swabbing the decks. Don't worry about these pirates that are coming and plundering everything. Don't worry about them. Certainly don't take up arms. Certainly don't fight back. Yep, everything's fine. And then the captain will like go over with the pirates and then just be like, don't worry about it, everybody. I'm just going over here to make sure everything's good. And then they'll pull the board back and we'll be left on a ship that has nothing on it. No food, no nothing. Left adrift in the middle of the ocean. And then they'll all leave and be like, okay, bye. And we'll all be like, oh, well, I guess we're just going to starve to death on a boat. Like that's fucking what's happening. And we all still go to work. Like, we all still go to work. That's the most astounding part. Like, that's the thing that I think, like, future generations, looking back on this period of time, are just going to be like, why did they keep working? Like, what? They were working for nothing. Like, they obviously weren't getting anything out of it. Like, was it just because of, like, base subsistence, I suppose? Yeah, I guess so. Like, renewables will cover almost all of global electricity demand growth out to 2025, becoming the world's top source of electricity within 3 years, new figures reveal. Carbon brief analysis of figures in the International Energy Agency Electricity Market Report 2023 shows the renewables combined with resurgent nuclear power will more than cover growth in electricity demand between 2022 and 2025. Below, Carbon Brief runs through the report's key findings via 5 charts. By 2025, Asia will account for half the world's electricity consumption, and 1/3 of global electricity will be consumed in China. Like, we are getting left behind in all of this. Like, China is the place that's producing all of the renewable energy. They're the ones that are building the solar panels. They're the ones that are increasing the power grid. They're the ones that are actually doing all of this. While we throw, like, a pithy penny at it, and that penny goes in the pocket of Bill Gates or something anyway. This is the story that is going to leave us in the dust. Because as we're, kicking the coal can, we got to reinvest in clean coal. That's what we got to do. We need more clean coal. While we're talking that stupid, idiotic, moronic game, China's building all the shit. It's building all the stuff we need. And of course, the dim-witted amongst us are like, well, China's increased pollution. Yeah, of course China's increased pollution. Because it's doing the job of all the rest of the world. That the entire rest of the world, that the international rules-based order is fucking doubling down on coal production. While China's like, okay, well, somebody's got to build these solar panels. Like, somebody's got to build this stuff. And so they're doing it. And yeah, of course that's going to increase pollution over the short term. Right? Like, for God's sakes. Yearly stationary battery systems additions by country and region. Oh, well, the United States is actually building stuff. Wow. Battery systems, the United States in 2022 actually built more than China. Holy shit. I'm blown away. I got to tell you, actually, I'm blown away by this. Like I'm used to the United States just being inert, like an inert little lump on the side of the road. When work equals food and shelter, yep, they got you by the balls. That's the truth. That is the truth. They can basically do what they want, right? They can do what they want because they know that if you... But, like, they're making things so unlivable and so untenable that eventually people will just stop paying. Like, and it's one thing if one person stops paying rent, but if 1 million people stop paying rent, like, if it's one thing if one person steals food, but if 1 million people steal food, like, and this is what they're setting themselves up for. This is what they're setting themselves up for. Good to see you, Command Genius. NATO is now making propaganda targeted to kids. Yeah, of course. You got to get them when they're young, right? That's the whole purpose of the education system. You got to get them when they're young, right? You got to vet out the ones that are the yes men, and you got to vet, and you also got to vet out the ones that understand that this thing is bullshit. Like you got to separate these people. And then you got to send your yes men down, and those become your corporate CEOs, right? Because when you tell them, okay, you got to lay off 100 million or lay off 100,000 people, impoverish a bunch of people, and hey, we'll see you at Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, they'll say yes, sir, right? Like that's what you need to do. And the people who are like, this is an immoral system that should be stopped, those kids need to be funneled into poverty. They need to be taken away. F for those kids, right? Like that's the way it works. It actually works. Generally, communists don't want to see lower living standards. Communism is a condition of post-scarcity and hyper-productivity, with all sharing what's produced. Capitalism centralizes wealth. Yeah. Hux, so many delusional people in your TikTok live comments. It's actually so embarrassing. Like, I mean, I suspect that most of them are just kids. That's all it is. Like, when you're a kid, you believe all kinds of dumb shit. Like, that's just the hard truth. Like, and it's... I know that I lament the stupidity of it, but, like, when I was a kid, I believed that, like, Jesus Christ was coming back at any moment. So, like, if you can believe that a wizard is coming down to Earth at any moment who's going to dispense... riches to the good whites and go after those dirty Muslims, right? Like if you can believe that, then there's basically nothing you won't believe. And you know, we're also trained by an education system to be extremely complacent and gullible. And so somebody who's standing up and saying like, hey, stop being complacent and gullible, right? Actually use your brain. I know you haven't been trained how to use your brain. You've just been trained how to write things on a piece of paper, and not even in cursive anymore, just like literally printed. So we're basically trained to be illiterate, and the result is when somebody stands up and says, "Hey, don't be illiterate." Oh, well, I got trained for 12 years to be illiterate. You're the dumb one. The real Nazis are the Nazis that fight the Nazis. And then you have all of, like, the social media stuff, right? Like, it's not just the education system. There's also, like, an entire social media apparatus that the CIA and the FBI and the State Department spend billions of dollars to try to keep people very, very illiterate and stupid. And just as long as you... And if all you do is say, yes, sir... And if all you do is just bow your head and just go, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. If that's all you do, then, you know, you'll do fine in the society until you're abandoned. But like, you're not going to be able to see it coming. Yeah, Kurtzeg, yeah, biggest source of billionaire propaganda on YouTube. That's more or less what I'm talking about, yeah. They're doing that thing they talked about a few weeks ago, making capitalism cute. Yeah, make the subjugation of First Nations people and black people cute. Yeah, exactly. NATO uploaded a video to their YouTube channel called NATO Plays Among Us, and it's obviously targeted to kindergartners. Yeah, like like these people are psychos. They have no shame. They're not capable of that, and we're just completely bought into it as a people. And I do continuously ask the question, like, what is it actually going to take what is it actually going to take before people start recognizing that the entire structure of the society has been put in initially was put in place by slavers, like literally like what people who would be billionaire oligarchs today, and the entire system was put in place in order to maintain their power and privilege. And since then, that system has been handed down the line to further slavers and further psychopaths, right? That the people who are in power now are enormous grifters who have never been interested in building a civil society, who have never been interested in building a nation, that all of the decisions that get made at the highest level are exclusively to get more wealth for themselves exclusively. The only time America has actually been able to move away from that is through mass action and mass protest. That there's never been a time in American history where the ruling class has been like, oh, we should do this beneficial thing for the society because it's the right thing to do and it's a proper way to build a civilization or a nation. It's just never been the case. But we're not taught that history in school, and so people pretend like it doesn't exist because they don't know any better. And if you try to tell them about it, then they make fun of you because it's cooler and better to be stupid. Right? The stupider you are, the better you are in this society. It's like a real idiocracy sort of situation where, like, if you're actually smart, then you're a nerd and all. Look at this guy, he thinks he knows things, like that kind of ridiculous bullshit thinking. But it's like the decline of our civilization right in front of our eyes. And what that does is it opens up the society to enormous grifters, like people like Peterson or Shapiro, who are just enormous grifters. Like Shapiro's basically a Nazi, and these enormous grifters are able to come in and say a bunch of big words, do a bunch of fancy talk, but they're illiterate themselves and extraordinarily stupid. But because they say a bunch of fancy words hung together, it makes them sound like they have some kind of credibility. And really, if the whole pitch is like, buck up, and then you do, like, okay. But it doesn't mean that they're going to prevent the collapse of the dollar. And they're not even saying anything about, the evils of United States imperialism, how the society is actively turning against itself in obvious ways. Like, really, really obvious. Like, you've got to be really dim-witted at this point to think that the society's not turning against itself. But when you have giant organizations like NATO who are actively working to propagandize the population, like, what do you expect to see happen? Santora says there was a major strike across India a while ago. To the guy asking above, yes, it is real. It did happen, but I have not been updated since. I mean, we're seeing more and more strike actions. We've seen them in France. We've seen them in the UK. Like, the UK had the largest nurses' strike in the history of the UK. That happened just last week. And we're going to see more of it. Like, it's just straight up. And the real question isn't that the strikes will happen. It's the question of how will the system respond. And I'm pretty confident about how the system is going to respond in America, because anytime there has been mass public action, there's been just an enormous crackdown. And how do we get to the general strike? I mean, just keep organizing, right? You want to send letters? Don't send letters to politicians, send letters to unions. That's what you do. And the grumbling is starting to happen across Canada and the United States. Like, it's obvious that it's coming, but it's what's going to be the event, what's going to be the catalyst, what's it going to take? Like, what is it going to take? Like, we already know that these people are pilfering hundreds of billions of dollars from us. We already know that they're offshoring them in offshore accounts. We already know that they're all going to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Like these are things that we know, that are obvious, that are like right in front of us. And yet there are still people who are like, yeah, Elon, you're the greatest ever, Elon. One of the greatest grifters to ever exist, Elon Musk. And So what is it going to take? That's what I find myself asking a lot. Like, what is it going to take? And I think that the tipping points are going to be the death of the baby boomer generation combined with the growth of Gen Z. Like, a lot of these Gen Z kids that are on the TikTok right now, like, they grow up and they begin to see that what they're saying is childish or what they believed was ridiculous. And they'll look back on it and be like, oh my God, I cannot believe I was an Elon stan. Like, because that's what happens when you grow up. You look back on the people you were worshiping and you go, oh yeah, like that person was actually a scummy idiot. And like all of the jerking off we do over people like Bill Gates and stuff like this. And so the combination of the death of the baby boomer generation and the growing up of Gen Z and subsequent generations, it's yeah, and I'm wondering if mounting climate disasters will push people over the edge. Yeah. And like when it comes to the climate crisis, we are at the point now where if you're denying the existence of the climate crisis, then I just walk away from those people. Like, go to NASA, like go like listen to literally every government on the face of the planet, like the World Health Organization, the World Bank, the IMF. There's literally no organization left outside of like PragerU that's actually saying this shit's not happening. And if you're not going to pay attention to like literally NASA, then we don't need to treat you like you're a serious person, because you're not. Like, you're just not. And what is happening, I think, especially with the climate change issue, because we know that the vast majority of the public understands that climate change is real. So what's happening is you have this small, extremely vocal minority that understands that it's being left behind and understands that it's being pushed out, that is trying to get its voice extra heard, but it's for nothing. Like, it's to no longer believe in the existence of climate change is to essentially say, I'm a flat earther and I'm happy with it. It's like, okay, there's so many things that I think people are going to look back on and just be like, man, I cannot believe that we even tolerated that shit. Like, I cannot believe we tolerated people walking around pretending like this major, massive crime. Like, imagine there was a military on a boat coming right now to your shores right now. And everybody was like, oh, there's the boat. Here's the pictures. We've got the evidence. Your own military was like, yep, there's the boat. Here it is. Here's it coming. And then the guy beside you was like, there's no boat. Like, nah, I don't think we're going to be paying it. And then if your governor was like, yeah, there's no boat. It's all what Chinese propaganda. Like, that's basically where we're at with this stuff. And anytime people come in and try to pretend, like Jordan Peterson's a good example. Jordan Peterson's gone hardcore climate change denier. Recently on his own Twitter, he was putting up climate change denialism, and it's just fraudulent bullshit that's obviously... Like, he puts up a graph. The graph ends in 1890, like before the Industrial Revolution. It's like, yeah, bud. Like, if all you're going to do is cherry pick information to try to lie to people about the nature of the situation, then you can pretend, you can basically believe what you like. Like, you could believe what you like. And dude, Peterson has completely gone off the deep end. Like, if you're still defending this guy, like, I don't know what to say to people anymore. Like, he's literally doxing people, obviously in the pocket of corporate power, obviously trying to be an apologist for climate change denialism. Like, that's the thing that I think is so funny, is that there's no other reason for him to do it. Like, unless he's being paid, there's literally no reason for him to even talk about it. He's illiterate on the subject. He doesn't know anything, right? He's not an expert. He's just a guy with a platform. That's straight up all he is. He's just some dude with a platform, and he's convincing his followers, who more and more are looking just like gullible rubes by the day, that climate change isn't real because, well, climate is, you can't really say what climate is, because when you say climate, it just means everything. So it's just baby talk, right? Like, and we're all just like eating it up. We just love baby talk. We love being talked to. Like here's the keys. Oh, you can't really talk about climate change because that means everything. Oh, that's a good point, Uncle Jordy. Like, what is it gonna take? Like, what's it gonna take? And I do think that the collapse of the dollar is going to be a big moment. Like, the collapse of the dollar is going to be a big, because I think what's happening in lots of cases is that there is a sense of, like, a toleration that is happening, especially amongst, like, people who would consider themselves centrists or liberals. There's this idea that, like, okay, these guys are saying this absurd, ridiculous, crazy bullshit, but I guess, free speech and they have the right to say this absolute asinine, completely corrosive Nazi level bullshit. But oh yeah, I guess free speech and all that. Well, once the dollar plummets, once the society goes into free fall, once homelessness starts to spread, once poverty becomes real, I think that toleration is going to go right away. It's going to go right away. And like Jordan Peterson fans will start picking up guns and act like the Nazis they actually are. And people will have to respond to it. Like we're not like, we are ill-equipped emotionally to deal with the swiftness of the decline that's coming. And I think most people will just start acting out of fear. But all of this, like, hyper-individualistic kind of thinking and all of this kind of stuff, it's going to go out the window right away. Because it's going to become so obvious that, like, major systems are failing. Like, it's going to become so obvious that that's the case. And yet, and like, it's like that episode of The Simpsons with the monorail, right? That everybody thought this monorail was a great idea until it crashed, right? Well, the crash is coming, and it's going to come in a big and a serious way. And if you go through it and you still have a job, right? Like, we're already at Great Depression levels of poverty, right? We're already in, like, Great Depression levels. So we haven't even experienced the full scale of the collapse yet. And the collapse is coming. And there are people who understand it. French firefighters set themselves alight and start fighting against police. And for those of you on TikTok, we've got 2 firefighters who have literally lit themselves on fire in front of a police line. Like, there's what's going to have to start. That's what's going to have to actually start happening. Like, there are societies and cultures that understand what's happening to them. And it's the question is, are we going to act like adults or not about it? Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the yeah, just the garbage. Just the brain dead garbage on TikTok. With one exception, somebody said one thing that was nice. That's good. Jesus Christ, man. We absolutely deserve the collapse that's coming. Like, what for those of you who are still jerking off over capitalism over there, just remember this conversation and remember these words. We absolutely deserve the collapse. We absolutely deserve it. We have worked extremely hard not to unify the society, not to build a civil society, not to do anything that has any value. We have worked as hard as possible to earn the collapse that is coming. Here's a fun little story that I ran across. The QAnon Queen is telling her followers to shoot migrants. The so-called QAnon Queen of Canada, Romana Didulo, issued a notice to her Telegram followers about migrant caravans and to shoot them on sight. Like, weird little cults are going to pop up, and some of them are not going to be so little. Weird cults are going to pop up all over the place. And people like this, who are saying, let's start shooting migrants, let's start shooting people for just like moving across territory, these are the people who are going to be leading. Like, for real. Like, here's a woman who calls Canada the Kingdom of Canada. And here's some of her response. Her followers, as they typically do, celebrated Dulo's latest proclamation and supported it wholeheartedly. Most just thanked her for protecting their country, but a select few leaned into the proposed violence. I'll quite happily take up a job at the border shooting illegals, said one of her followers on response. Men, women, or children, I'd shoot them all. Normal society, right? Like, what a normal place we have going on here. We're such a normal people doing normal stuff, living in such a normal way. And what's astounding to me, like, oh, this person should just be in prison. Like, sorry, your free speech doesn't include protecting people who are calling for acts of violence. So, sorry, you can't just say, hey, we should shoot people in the society. We should shoot minority groups. Hey, why don't we just round up the Jews, right? Like this, here in Canada, there was a person here in Toronto that was handing out pamphlets calling up for the rounding up of Jews, and he spent a year in jail, and I'm glad that he did. I don't think it was long enough, frankly. And this idea that, like, well, they've got the freedom of speech, they can say they can say what they like. Okay. Like, if you want to live in a lawless, Wild West kind of shithole, sure. But for those of us who are interested in living in a civil society, maybe we should take this a little bit seriously. And maybe a person like this should probably not be allowed to walk around and have a platform to speak from. And in the meantime, Hershey sued over chocolate containing heavy metals. So, for those of you who think, man, why is it that we're getting stupider, it seems? The magazine, Hershey's Special Dark Bar and Lily's 70% bar were high in lead. And Lily's 85% bar was high in lead and cadmium, the magazine said. Like, if you're eating Hershey's chocolate, you're eating lead. Remember how we all like to bang on the idea that the boomers are the boomers are consuming a lot of lead, or they consumed a lot of lead as kids? We're still consuming it. We still have lead in our diet, apparently. Lazaro said that reasonable consumers would be turned off by such levels because they pose a serious health risk, and that consumers rely on Hershey to be truthful about ingredients in its products. Yeah, I always thought American chocolate tastes like ass. Yeah, it's all the lead. Is it Cadbury or cadmium? No, cadmium. Yeah, cadmium right there. It was high in lead and cadmium. Like, if you're eating Hershey's chocolate, you're eating lead and cadmium. And yet we're supposed to buy into this idea that we don't need any regulatory oversight whatsoever. And again, like, I come back to the idea that, like, no, we don't need regulatory oversight for these organizations. We need these capitalists to be gone. We need them to not be in charge. We need them to be out of the process completely, 100%. No say, no shares, no wealth, no money, nothing whatsoever. They need to be gone. Yeah, the God of the free market says lead is good for you, apparently. Yeah, apparently. And, like, how many times do we need to see the same story over and over again? That, like, your food companies are poisoning you. Your food companies are absolutely poisoning you. And giving you the most unhealthy possible food they can give you. And then simultaneously funding campaigns that say that if you point out that being overweight is a problem, that you're quote-unquote fat shaming, right? That's what they've done. That's what Disney does with its shitty movies. That it releases a movies with like a diverse acting crew. But if you point out that their movie is shit, then they go, "Oh, that's because you're a bigot." Right? Well, in the same way, if you have a population that's fat and overweight because the food they eat is trash, because capitalists make more money that way, and then you point that out, they go, "Oh, you're just fat shaming. That's what you're doing. You're just fat shaming." Right? Who wants to live in a society where the food you eat is healthy, right? Who wants to live in a society where it's simply not possible to eat lead while eating chocolate? Who wants to live in a society where all of the food is healthy and everybody looks good because of it? Yeah, I'd fucking hate to live in a society where everybody was looking good and eating healthy food all the time. Boy, would that be a real hardship. Did the government find the lead or a private party? Good question. Hershey's has been sued by a consumer who accused the company of selling dark chocolate. So it's literally just like a random person. Right? It's just like a random person who probably ran the test themselves. Coca-Cola paid scientists to say that exercise matters more than diet. Yeah, well, no, take a look at what the sugar companies did, dude. Like, you want to take a look at people who should be incarcerated, for sure. It's the sugar companies. They, like, convinced everybody that sugar was good for them. And that fat was the real problem. Right? Like, this is your free market at work. Like, we're eating lead, we're eating trash food, all of our food. And in America, it's, like, way, way worse. They got high fructose syrups. Like, I remember I was in America, and I was like trying to do some grocery shopping, and I literally was like looking at the ingredients, and everything had high fructose corn syrup in it because it's so cheap to produce. You just fill it, you just put it in as a filler for everything, and in things that you would never expect to see. And the same is true of sugar. That like sugar exists in things that you would never expect to see, and basically, if you're eating anything that has any processing in it whatsoever, it's trash. It's just total garbage. And so there's a reason why we're in this incredibly unhealthy state. And there's your free market innovation for you. Like, yeehaw. Oh, we got a good one from Rainer. I always love Rainer Shave. Always really, really good work. China is economically defeating the United States, imperialism. Russia is militarily defeating it. Unless Washington's provocations upset the dangerously unsteady balance it depends on and lead to a third world war, the future of warfare between the United States and its geopolitical challengers will not primarily be based in the realm of international flare-ups, like the Chinese spy balloon upset. It will be based in a series of economic struggles that end with the imperialists losing trade dominance over Eurasia, and therefore losing their neo-colonial extractive sources. The American war machine's ruse of treating a benign Chinese aircraft as malicious, then shooting it down for dramatic effect, has had no impact on history other than provide another reason for China to be irritated at the United States. And unless Washington oversteps in a way which it knows would lead to a crisis too big for it to handle, China and its other adversaries will never respond to Washington's antics by escalating towards open war. These kinds of stunts by the imperialists are nothing more than ways to narratively justify its militarism, sanctions, and war-related austerity, which the imperialists hope will reverse the transition towards multipolarity. I find these manufacturings of drama on Washington's part relatively uninteresting, because the PSYOP managers aren't going to succeed at restoring U.S. hegemony. Hyperbolic headlines about a balloon can't undo a process of economic development and geostrategic realignment that's been underway for decades, and that's the natural evolution away from post-war unipolarity. Over half a century after the 1963 film 55 Days at Peking created the famous quote, "Let China sleep, for when she rises the world will tremble," we're finally seeing what this rise was going to look like. The anti-imperialist Pepe Escobar describes the extent of the way the PRC is changing Eurasia's economic orientation. Acute supply chain decoupling, the crescendo of Western hysteria over Beijing's position on the war in Ukraine, and serious setbacks on Chinese investments in the West all play on the developments of BRI 2.0. Beijing will be focusing simultaneously on several nodes of the global south, especially neighbors in ASEAN and across Eurasia. Think, for instance, the Beijing-funded Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway, Southeast Asia's first, a BRI project opening this year as Indonesia hosts the rotating ASEAN chairmanship. China is also building the East Coast Rail Link in Malaysia, and has renewed negotiations with the Philippines for 3 railway projects. Then there are the superposed interconnections. The EAEU will clinch a free trade zone deal with Thailand. On the sidelines of the epic return of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to power in Brazil this past Sunday, officials of Iran and Saudi Arabia met amid smiles to discuss, what else? BRICS. Excellent choice of venue. Brazil is regarded by virtually every geopolitical player as prime neutral territory. Even though the PRC, unlike DPRK, has decided not to openly voice support for Russia's anti-fascist war, Operation Z is why this project is economically undermine the empire has become so successful in the last year. The foremost aim behind Washington's provoking Russia into intervening was to weaken Russia enough so that both the Russian Federation and the PRC could get successfully defeated by imperialist schemes. The calculus behind this was that when America and Europe used the geopolitical escalation to fully decouple from Russia, and ultimately China as well, the shock would be destructive enough to bring about the scenario of destabilizing Eurasia, which depends on the assumption that the imperial powers, after their half a millennia of extracting from the colonized and formerly colonized people, consequently have the capacity to crush Eurasia's emerging superpowers. That their past successes at destroying other societies guarantee they'll keep being successful at it. This hubris, and the desperate self-deception it requires, was shown when the EU's foreign policy chief Josep Borrell declared after the sanctions had proven insufficient this fall, "The world needs Europe. Most of the rest of the world is a jungle, and the jungle could invade the garden." These are the words of somebody who's just lost, and lost in a final sense. The failure of the sanctions to bring about their objective represents a vast, fruitless sacrifice on the part of the imperial power structure. The campaign to economically isolate Russia and China has destroyed the social stability of the imperialist countries, driving down living standards as shocks devastate the working classes within those places. Now our ruling class faces a greater danger than ever of uprisings, without having gained the geopolitical victories this destruction was supposed to bring. The plan was for Americans and Europeans to economically suffer in the short term, so that the empire could win on the Eurasian geopolitical chessboard, restoring neo-colonial extraction and ultimately bringing back social stability within the core countries. Instead, what the imperialists have gotten is a crisis for the core which will never end, not so long as workers' revolution in the core is delayed. Intensified austerity and repression is all the core's proletariat can expect until they manage to overthrow their bourgeoisie dictatorship. The only logical outcome, at least if the workers' movement gains enough strength, is the end to the rule of our oligarchy, because more and more are coming to recognize this reality that their circumstances can only change if they smash the state that keeps capital in power. This has been true since the beginning of capitalism. Our socio-economic system was always doomed to fail. With this dual war against imperialism waged by the Russians and the Chinese, the process of capitalist decline is accelerating. This is true both in the places the imperial ruling class still controls and in Russia, which is run by a less economically powerful oligarchy. As Russia's neoliberal system proves unable to provide for the people's needs during wartime, the war has sidelined the fascists within Russia's government, while giving more power to the communists. It was the communists who helped pressure Putin into taking action against Ukrainian fascism, and into therefore solidifying Russia's role as a challenger towards imperialism. As present trends go, they're gaining the leverage to carry out a Bolshevik revolution 2.0. The equivalent is true in Belarus, where the communists hold great influence over a bourgeoisie state that's assisted Russia in the anti-fascist war. This successful joint attack against the empire is why China's BRI, that's the Belt and Road Initiative, has become as effective as it is now. Xi has promised Russia to strengthen its ties with China and ease the PRC's project of lifting the peripheral countries out of poverty. Under even the least optimistic of circumstances, the acceleration of the transition to multipolarity that Operation Z represents will without a doubt bring the defeat of U.S. imperialism as a globally hegemonic force. And should the class struggle sufficiently succeed worldwide, we'll see both a restoration of the Soviet Union and a new wave of revolutions across the peripheral countries, which are through the BRI gaining the economic strength to no longer be controlled by the empire. What could ultimately come is revolution in the core countries as well, and with it, the end of capital's ability to coerce any of the historically colonized countries into submission. The bourgeoisie will have lost almost definitively, and as long as the future socialist states maintain commitment to class struggle, the bourgeoisie will then be able to go extinct as a social class. A bit hopeful at the end there, but always good to read what Rainer's writing. Yep, that guy. Nutritional labels still don't have to show recommended intake of added sugars. It's something like 10 grams. Yeah, 10. Adam says, I'm a couple minutes behind. Speaking of chocolate, the whole outrage over woke cartoon M&M candy characters seems to be a distraction from Mars' child slavery lawsuit. Yeah, I'd say that's probably right. Like, you got to report on something, right? So you might as well report on nothing. Like, and who gives a shit about, like, M&Ms with different shoes? Like, it just shows you how unserious of people we are. Like, the idea that Tucker Carlson carted out this M&M stuff and anybody paid any attention to it whatsoever. Like, if I was paying attention to, like, a commentator, like a political commentator, when they came out with that M&M stuff, I would turn them off and I would never go back. Like, and the fact that there's anybody that listened to that and then continues watching Tucker Carlson seriously just shows you where we are as a people. Paolo, good to see you. Just arrived. What are you reading? This is Rainer Shea's newest one. Russia is economically defeating U.S. imperialism, or China is economically defeating U.S. imperialism. Russia is militarily defeating it. I think that's absolutely the case. The Belt and Road Initiative is the most threatening thing to the United States empire that exists in the world today. That it's going to be extremely difficult for the Americans to overcome the disaster that this is bringing to their doorstep. Like, the United States empire has been predicated entirely on the idea that we should be able to force other nations to do all our work for us. It's like classic capitalism, right? And the only thing that will trade for the resources we extract from these places are dollars. So we don't even need to do anything. We don't even need to have our own workforce create anything. We don't need to trade anything that we actually make or commit labor to. We can literally just punch a couple of numbers on a screen and then trade those numbers away for real things that actually are created. And this dynamic is going to end on the world stage, and it's going to end fairly soon. The biggest reason it's going to end is because the rest of the world is going to stop trading in the dollar. that they're going to start trading in the renminbi or the yuan. Brazil is attempting to set up a federated currency throughout South America, and they're going to start trading off the dollar. And once they stop trading off the dollar, they're not going to. That's going to make the value of the dollar plummet, because the entire rest of the world is going to look at America and be like, what does this dollar actually get us? What does this dollar actually buy us? And the answer is nothing. Nothing important. And so everyone's going to turn to China and India, because India is also going to start reindustrializing itself after the British forcibly deindustrialized it. And so India is going to reindustrialize, probably rebuild its textile capacity, because that's historically what it used to do. So there's a point of national pride there. And the rest of the world is going to leave America in the dust. Like, this shit is coming. And it's going to hit us so hard and fast. And if my TikTok chat is anything to go by, there's going to be a lot of dupes that just get completely blindsided by it, who are just not going to understand what's going on as it's happening. For those of you who are like trying to call in on TikTok, like, I don't talk to the TikTok stream for a reason, right? You can see it. You can come and talk to me on YouTube, right? YouTube's there. It's in the description, right? I don't have a big history of platforming fascists, so I like to vet people. French says, I'd watch a Canadian commie nightly news show, PBS NewsHour, but with a lizard sociopath callouts. Well, that's basically what you're doing now, isn't it, French? Like, that's basically what I'm trying to set up. Like, a big reason why I do this is because I think it's disgraceful that, like, over the past 5 years especially, I really noticed it. You'd have, like, a panel discussion, and the people on the panel would essentially be, like, an open fascist, a liberal, and a conservative. And that would be the panel. And there would be nobody. And I just found myself screaming at the television screen, nationalize it. Like, why aren't you even bringing nationalism up? Why isn't this part of the conversation at all? And it's just obvious. It's obvious why it's not part of the conversation. Because the owners of the news media are the same people who own the means of production, and they don't want nationalism to even be brought into the question. Like, they don't want anybody to stand up and say capitalists are worthless, should be chased out of the system completely, should not have assets, should not have a voice, and should likely be incarcerated for their many crimes. Command Genius says, here's the worst take I heard on neoliberal Discord service. First Nations people are just LARPers that want autonomy from the government. Yikes. That's a big fucking yikes, dude. That's not neoliberalism. That's just some straight fascist shit right there. But I mean, what's the difference, really, when you think about it? What is the difference between a neoliberal and a fascist at the end of the day? Paolo says, I'm not that informed in foreign politics and economy, and I'd like to expand my knowledge. What are, in your opinion, good sources of information? I think that you do right with Yanis Varoufakis. He's the former finance minister of Greece, dealing with the imperial core during their period of collapse. So Yanis Varoufakis is a pretty good source. Michael Hudson is a really good source. Mark Blythe is another good one. Richard Wolff. I should have said Richard Wolff before any of these other guys. Richard Wolff is for sure. He's like the most prominent Marxist economist in North America. Richard Wolff is definitely worth listening to. Chris Hedges, good listening to. I'd also just fire off, like, Noam Chomsky is good in the Imperial Core. Michael Parenti is really good outside the Imperial Core. I'm just now going through Matt Taibbi's book, The Divide, which I think is crucial reading. So I'm probably missing some others, but there's just like a rattling off of a bunch of different authors that I think are really worth your time. Really worth your time. Chris Hedges' Death of the Liberal Class, I think, should be taught in schools. Yeah, but if you wanted to keep it more Marxist focused, like Richard Wolff, he runs a weekly show that talks about exactly this world politics. Another good source would be someone like John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer talks about war, specifically war, in a very prescient and with clarity would be how I would describe him. Just very, very, very clear and lots of clarity in the way that he thinks about it. Yeah, like the old school sources that people would recommend, like NPR or any of this kind of stuff, like they're not bad in terms of acknowledging the existence of world events, but they don't really give you a larger meta picture, and they don't really take the step back. And you'll notice, one of the things that you'll really notice about political commentary, especially in regards to China, is that there's no conversation whatsoever about the Belt and Road Initiative, even though it is quite literally what all geopolitics pivots around. That the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative is an attempt by the Chinese to link all of the continent. Most of the world's population is on the Asian continent, to link Europe and Africa all together by land rail. Like it's been called a new Silk Road, right? Even the graph that we're looking at here calls it a Silk Road corridor, right? So it's a series of trade routes that are designed to connect all of these countries together by land, because the United States' stated strategy when going to war with China, which the Rand Corporation, the Pentagon, has printed an article called Thinking Through the Unthinkable, War with China, where their conclusion was that they could blow up something like 30 to 50% of Chinese trade through maritime channels. And so China's response to that is to build rail and to make sure that rail is secured. And Australia is absolutely caught up in the middle of that. Australia, like high-level officials and high-level people in Australia are really saying, we don't want a war and we're not going to pick a side. The response to that, of course, by the Americans is, we're going to make you. We're going to make you pick a side. And it's going to be us. It's absolutely going to be us. Yeah, you cut a liberal, it bleeds a fascist, absolutely. Fabella, good to see you. I've also been screaming to myself, why don't we just nationalize our healthcare system? It's so obvious. Well, you can't just... But there's money to be made there, right? Who cares if people die? Like, that doesn't matter. Will, how you doing, bud? I think this is your first comment. Hope it's a beautiful one. I actually debate on things surrounding Hedges and policy debate, and I totally agree that the other sources you gave earlier were good. But Hedges are known to spread misinformation. Which is why I don't listen to him. While he might be good for learning about imperialism, if you're looking for a truly reliable source, then Hedges is not it. I recommend Campbell if you want neoliberal. So what like I've basically read everything that Hedges has ever written. What misinformation would you say that he has spread around? Like I just want a little bit of clarity on this, because I actually really respect Chris Hedges. So I'd like to know more about what you think he's spreading around that you would call misinformation. Hope you guys are all doing well out there, man. Hope you're all doing well out there. I feel like I need some water is what I need, honestly, more than anything. I just feel like sometimes it does feel like I'm screaming at a brick wall, you know what I mean? Stray skies? Stray skies? Sky? I'm going to call you Sky. This looks like it's your first comment, bud. So, and it's a nice enough one. How's it going? It's going well, bud. It's going well. I feel like I'm not in despair about any of this kind of stuff. I'm not into I'm not in despair about any of this. That I used to be, when I was younger, I used to get really depressed and really in despair about the state of how the empire is mismanaging itself and betraying itself and putting us into a pretty free fall decline. That, but as I've gotten older, I've learned to detach from it a little bit more, and so it's more like just watching an incredible show, you know. And I do worry. I have to admit, I do worry about how our country is going to respond to the collapse of the dollar. That the collapse of the dollar is going to be a world-shaping event that most people, like, if there is a lesson to be drawn from it, or if there is a realization that I hope most people have, it will be, I hope it will be the realization of, well, why didn't anyone tell me it was coming? Why why would why did nobody actually tell us that we were in such a precarious situation? Why was it that no one was actually saying that this is even possible? Why would anyone, like, I think most Americans believe that the dollar is solid. Just as most British people thought that the pound sterling was solid before its collapse. And when it happens, I hope that people recognize and realize, like, oh, literally no one was talking about this. That it was such a, it was so absolutely apparent, but buried completely. And it is very obvious that it's going to happen. But Will says, of course, he's written some on Russia that kind of glorifies some uncool things the government's done. For example, I believe he's an avid believer in Russian revisionism, despite the war in Ukraine. I don't know that I understand that. Like, what has he said about the war in Ukraine that has convinced you about revisionism? Because I can tell you what my opinion is about the Ukrainian war, that Russia was mainly responding to a coup and then a Nazi-fueled war in the Donbass. Like, the narrative that we've been given about the war in Ukraine is obviously false, as all things are these days. And Hedges has steadily been moving in that direction. Like, when it first happened, I was talking very loudly about that. Hedges, of course, was a little bit more careful, but has been essentially opening that discourse up. And he'll always couch it with this, like, but that doesn't excuse the invasion, to which I say, fighting Nazis is always the right thing to do. Like, you've got to fight Nazis that are shelling ethnic Russians on the border of Russia. And I'm more or less of the opinion that if Putin hadn't have done it, he would have been removed from office, and somebody would have been put in who would have done it. That's more or less my opinion of it. That he didn't really actually have a choice. I feel like capitalism is a sham. This is from Sky. Built by the government of our world just to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. It's insane how people think capitalism is a good thing. You can tell it's not. Yeah, there you go, Sky. That puts you ahead of everybody else, right? Bye, Luke. Don't need Nazis in the chat, okay, bud? No Nazis. And if you don't think you are, you're wrong. I have a very strict no Nazis policy. Sky, that puts you one step ahead of everybody else, you know? Like, if you understand that the system of capital is not working, right? Because there are lots of people, and I can glance over to my TikTok chat. Oh, yeah, there you go. To see just the dim-witted nature of most people in your society. Lots of lead eaters in the society. And but if you have reached the point where you are saying to yourself, this system is a problem, we've got to do something about this, that puts you ahead of the game. Will says, for real. I don't know what that's in response to, bud. But sure. For real. Why not? Why not? Oof, I gotta open up this window. It's getting hot in here. It's getting hot in here. So open a window. I am getting so hot. It's time to open a window. Hope you guys are all doing well out there in the world. Even you guys on TikTok that are saying your nutty stuff. Let's spend a little moment. Did you just say capitalism is long-term neutral? Oh, do we actually have people who are actually trying to fight in TikTok? God bless you guys. I've always thought that there are people. I know that people do come into my YouTube channel and they tell me that they're fighting on TikTok, and I'm just like, God bless you guys. God bless the guys that are wading into the weeds on TikTok, man. I don't have the power for that. I don't have the energy for that, man. Like it's just like dim-witted choice after dim-witted choice. Yet not all of us on TikTok are crazy. Thanks, Practical Mystic. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Yeah, I mean, capitalism is broken because of the Jewish globalism system, right? And then you get the like people who are like, capitalism has failed, but so does communism. That's my favorite. Yeah, I think your TikTok chat's mostly full of idiots who like to make fun of a man's death. Yep, Ronnie. Good old Ronnie McNutt. You know, that Ronnie McNutt thing, man, that's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to me that Ronnie McNutt has stuck around. You know, I assumed that would be around for like a month, you know? I assumed that Ronnie McNutt's death would be around for like a month at most. And in truth, I thought it was not going to last the week, if I had to be really honest. Like, we forget things immediately as a people. Like, we literally just like, a major traumatic event can happen, and then like Kim Kardashian will get a boob job, and everybody will be like, Kim Kardashian got a boob job. Right? Kim will break the internet or whatever, and we're all just like, oh, wow, I can't believe it. And then we just forget that thing happened. Like, and it's kind of, it's like that, it's repression is what it is. It's like we like to bottle things up and like just dig it deep inside and not talk about it and just completely forget about it. But Ronnie is different, man. Ronnie has persisted, and it's quite a thing. I don't know what to think of it. I do think, like, I don't think it's enough to simply say, we're making fun of Ronnie McNutt, her, because it's just lasted too long, right? The type of people who are gonna make fun of that kind of thing are the type of people who are gonna forget about it, you know, and they're just it's not gonna persist the way it has. The funny part is it's not even funny. TikTok just have super dark and unfunny humor. Saint Ronnie, yeah. I don't know what it is, man. I think on the one hand it could be just like like I do think that Nazis try to drive people to suicide, and I think that's probably a tactic that they're using on people like myself, that they're trying to use it as a way to be like, you should kill yourself, essentially, which I don't take very seriously, as you can tell. But I also think that there's like an aspect of it where people don't want to forget Ronnie McNutt, it seems. It just seems like they don't want to forget. And that I'm ostensibly doing something similar to what Ronnie McNutt was doing. And I also have hair and a beard, which Ronnie McNutt had hair and a beard and glasses. So we look somewhat similar, if you glance at us, I suppose. But even that, like, it just seems like I just don't understand how it persists so much. Anyway, I do think it's kind of funny. Yeah. Keep talking, saving nothing. Yeah, I'm not here to save anybody, bud. I'm here so that when we actually hit the collapse, maybe somebody will actually pay attention. Like, we are going to get to a point in our society where the populace will simply stop listening to corporate media. Like, that's it's a necessity. Like it's one of those things where like things are going to get so dramatically bad that people will just turn these stations off, and will start turning to alternative voices because it's gotten so obvious that they're fraudulent. Like, and you can see it in the way the news media has been trying to respond. Like the acknowledgement that climate change should be reported on as a fact instead of this both siding thing is the news media attempting to rebuild its credibility. But the coming events that are going to happen to us are going to be so overwhelmingly obvious that our news media is fraudulent that people will just turn it off. And the only people who will continue paying attention will be the literal Nazis or gullible rubes. And that'll be it. And so the best thing that you can do for somebody who's caught in a kind of news cycle thing is just turn the news off. Just turn it off. They're not helping you. And they're not interested in helping you. I think the reason people make fun of it is because it was on Facebook, to be 100% honest. Sky, I could believe that in the short term. Like, we're like 3 months out now, right? Like, that's a long, long time. That's a long, long time, you know? Yeah, you're way too optimistic. I lost faith in people. I mean, people are as good as their environment. That's something that I've come to learn. That people are, like, there is no such thing as quote-unquote human nature. Like, this whole human nature argument that comes out of capitalists is just something a psychopath would say to justify his psychopathy, right? That, like, you can't change it. Well, this is how we are, right? But no, humans and humanity itself is as good as its environment is. And if you create a society, or create a structure rather, like capitalism, well, you just reward psychopaths, right? That's how capitalism is. It's not that humanity is by its very nature psychopathic. It's that we live in a society that rewards psychopaths. And if you want to see humanity and see the type of humanity that isn't psychopathic, then you should be fighting to change the structure so that psychopaths are punished and not rewarded, right? Like, what we are seeing is not a result of human nature. It's that this is possible within human nature. And so what are we rewarding? And what is it that we can actually change? And what is it that we can actually alter? And one of the things that I would argue that we could alter is we could stop rewarding psychopaths. That would be a really good thing for us to start doing. Methane says, oh, they probably have got a plan for that, installing their own alternative sources already. Yet you just watch. People will end up tuning to the wrong ones, no doubt. Yeah, you are what you consume. I mean, you're right. I think, Methane, that they are already putting in, like, quote unquote alternative sources, and I do think that the alternative sources that are somewhat more to the left or somewhat more quote unquote left wing are basically getting corralled. I think I see that with the Jimmy Dore show, for example. Like, Jimmy Dore, when I was really paying attention to him, he was anti-war. Like, I consider him to be fairly left-wing, but it just seems like he's been corralled, and that he's being surrounded more and more by people who are pretty far on the right. And I think you see the same thing with Joe Rogan, that as much as Joe Rogan likes to say, oh, I'm like a liberal-minded type, I voted for Bernie Sanders, all that kind of stuff. Well, he's been surrounded by far-right lunatics. And that's more and more what I see happening. That like, the CIA understands that a person really is like an aspect of what's around him. That if you surround even a leftist with fascists, then that leftist will become more like the fascist. And I think that's more or less the strategy of people that the CIA want to put more control over. Like, they're not going to just straight up deplatform these guys, but they are going to be like, hey, let's make sure that CIA assets get on a show. Let's make sure, like, hey, move to Texas, you know? Like, let's corral these guys. Let's get them moved into position so that they're constantly just surrounded by far right lunatics. Haven't noticed it with Jimmy. I'm worried about things like breaking points or a couple other ones, but yeah, who knows? I mean, with Jimmy, it's like, I think the strategy with Jimmy is just to make sure he never reads the Communist Manifesto. That's really the strategy. That, like, if Jimmy actually sat down and read the Communist Manifesto, like, he's still of the older generation, and so he still kind of has that coloring, that anti-communist coloring that comes just by the bombardment of propaganda that happens. And anytime I hear him talk about communists, he always brings that in, right? He's not explicitly anti-communist, but he definitely has like a cultural coloring. And the power structure knows that a guy like this can never actually move further to the left. Like, he's already pretty far to the left as far as the American society is concerned. And so if he actually read the Communist Manifesto and actually understood something about communism, he could become pretty strong, I think. He could become a pretty strong force. And so I think the CIA is doing everything it can to make sure he never does, right? Just keep that out of the conversation. Keep surrounding him by further and further right-wing people. Keep directing him to other places. So even if he maintains this sort of left-wing position, well, then that's fine. Like, he can advocate for universal health care, right? That's fine. But what he can never do, and what he will not be allowed to do, is say we should seize the means of production and get rid of these worthless capitalists. That the capitalists are the problem, that they're the ones that are responsible for the decline of our civilization, and have never been interested in building a civilization. Like, have a good one, radio. And so as long as these figures are corralled, right, then they become kind of inert. You know, they can be the cultural icons. They can be the, like, I think Joe Rogan is exactly right, and I've seen it pretty explicitly with Joe Rogan, where, like, he'll have, like, Abby Martin on. This would always be his defense. He'd be like, well, but I have, like, sure, I platform Nazis, like, sure, I platform, like, overt people who call themselves fascists and are Nazis, but I also platform left-winger types, right? Well, take a look at the clips he sends around of those left-winger types. When he had Abby Martin on, the clip he sent around was the 5 minutes. He didn't let her talk about Gaza fights for freedom in the clip. He was like, so what do you think about aliens? And they had like a 5-minute conversation about aliens where Abby was like uncommittedly being like, I mean, I guess aliens are kind of kooky and weird. I'm here to talk about Gaza. But that's the clip that he sent around. So he's like, yeah, he's quote-unquote platforming leftists, but then burying them, right? So they exist only to give Rogan the small shred of credibility that he actually does care. Although, let's be frank about Joe Rogan. Like, the guy is an overt and obvious transphobe. His whole narrative of, it's okay to platform bad speech because you also platform good speech. Then the good speech beats the bad speech, right? Well, he doesn't platform trans rights activists. He'll platform a bunch of people and have big conversations about how trans people are bad. We should get trans people out of sports and it's outrageous and all this kind of stuff. He'll have hours of conversation about that, but he won't have one trans rights activist on his show. So he's an overt and obvious transphobe that's right in front of your face the whole time. And and incidentally, this whole narrative that he has where it's like, oh, it's fine to platform Nazis because good speech beats bad speech. Nazis don't care about speech. They don't care about it. They care about being platformed and recruiting. They care about pointing an arrow at themselves and saying, hey, fellow Nazis. And if it comes down to it, like, Nazis don't give a shit about your vote. They don't give a shit about any of that. They're going to pull out a gun and they're going to shoot you. That's what they're going to do. They don't give a fuck about your speech. They're not debating you to win. They're debating you to fluster you, to cause problems for you, to slow you down so that they can build power and recruit for themselves. So that when push comes to shove, they've got the guns and you don't. That's what Nazis are actually doing. This whole good speech beats bad speech narrative that comes out of the mouth of guys like Joe Rogan is naive, childish garbage. You're not going to defeat Nazis by voting them out. You're not going to defeat Nazis by defeating them in the marketplace of ideas. because Nazis don't give a shit about that. Capitalism, death cult or not, I hate it, and it's awfully flawed. That's my final and only opinion on this subject. It's a good one. It's a good one, Sky. It's a good one. Like, I argue that capitalism is a death cult because, like, it's no longer a economic system. Like, the neoliberal system of trickle-down economics, right? It always tried to defend itself and tried to protect, like, through people like Thomas Sowell or Milton Friedman. They always tried to defend themselves as if what they were doing was economics, but it's not economics. It's just a religious ideology. And once you see it as a religious ideology, then you begin to ask, okay, well, what's the point of the religious ideology? And the point of the religious ideology is to destroy everyone. And so what is that if not a death cult? Like, and the people who are following it are obviously cultists. Like, that the trifecta of worship is the worship of money, the worship of the self, and the worship of ignorance. That these three things create the holy trinity of capitalism. That money is God, right? You yourself, you might as well be like the Christ figure, and the ignorance that you all share together is the Holy Spirit. Cobra, I don't even know what that is, dude. Have I ever tried SPX puts? Like stock market shit? So buy into the gambling, basically. Have I ever gambled on the stock market? Not really. Like I bought a couple of shares of GameStop when that was happening. Made a little bit of money off of it, in fact. But but I don't really buy into the idea of gambling on the stock market. I don't think it's a very sane way to organize a society. When Nazis start to gain that small bit of power, they need to rise again. I'm going to go, well, you say that, Sky. We'll see. I mean, these sorts of, like, we already have, like, white supremacist groups organizing, like, MMA events and things like this. Like, Nazi groups exist all across America and are organizing with one another pretty clearly. We even have evidence that the Nazis that Canada and the United States trained in Ukraine have also been funneling themselves into these organizations, right? When you have quote unquote, Ukrainian refugees, well, some of those guys are going to be Azov guys, and they're coming over, and who do you think they're connecting with? And so we're literally training white supremacists in Ukraine to come over and then join white supremacist organizations here in America. And like this is serious shit that we're doing to ourselves, and we're definitely it's definitely going to blow up in our faces. I highly suggest everybody get prepared for it, because it is real and it is happening. Dmitry Laskaris, despite an annual military budget that is approximately 20 times larger than Russia's, NATO does not have the capacity to wage and sustain a large-scale war. Western arms manufacturers are robbing us blind. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. That's absolutely the case. Because it's never about... it's never been about, like, winning a war, right? It's war for the sake of war. It's just a way to make money, and this is the strategy of the arms manufacturers, right? Start a war, blow it up, and then get us to spend a bunch of money to reconstruct it. So there'll be a reconstruction period after these wars, where we will all pay to reconstruct the stuff that we ourselves blew up, and then we'll just go and blow it up again. So you have this nice little cycle of exploitation. Sky says, not just America either. Even here over in the UK, I've seen people with swastika tattoos in their arms in public. I find it disgusting and idiotic. Yeah, Sky, I mean, it's as naked as it can be in the UK. Like, you're telling me you're from the UK. Like, so you're dealing with, like, real strikes. And you know things have gotten really bad because they're starting to actually platform communists on their media. they're actually starting to say like, oh, we can't just ignore these people anymore. Like we can't just. They're actually allowing unionists on like Mick on their platforms. Like things are getting really really bad when the corporate media is forced to actually listen to people and actually report and respond to them in serious ways. And the big strikes that are sweeping through the UK, like what is happening to you in the UK? Like this Rishi, whatever his name is, Rishi Prima or whatever his fucking name is, the Goldman Sachs executive who's your prime minister now. Like some of the legislation that these guys have passed, they could just round people up for whatever reason they want, really. Like, oh, you were walking down the street while a protest was going on at some point. Like technically, these strikes that are going on, they could just start rounding these people up with the legislation that they've passed. And it's absolutely pathetic what's happening in the UK. And what is happening in the UK is coming for the rest of us. And I think the difference about what's going to happen in America is that like the UK doesn't really have the military or police force to be able to completely suppress and to oppress their public. America does. That if you were to treat the American police force as a military unto itself, it would be the third largest military on the planet. That it would be the American military, the American military, the Chinese military, and then the American police force. So when these moments of civil unrest happen, like the American police force isn't gonna be nice. Like they're not gonna softball it. Victor Bean Blossom, that is a real like Harry Potter. That's a lovely name, mate. I just want you to know. It's a real thank you so much for making me read that name, Victor Bean Blossom. So adorable. Hope this is a beautiful comment, bud. So, do you think you have a dedicated CIA agent monitoring you, or do you think it's a team of agents that checks up on you from time to time? I don't think I'm big enough. I would be surprised if I had a CIA agent like monitoring me. Probably not. Like I probably have a file, but I think most people have a file, so that's nothing new. Certainly not a group. I've done enough protest action, and I've been trying to organize enough protest action that I'm sure that, and I'm connected to enough organizations that I'm sure that there is like attention to a degree. But honestly, like it's not like we're taking over infrastructure or something, right? Like it's not like I just think the CIA has bigger fish to fry. So that's the long and short of it, if I was to be completely honest about it. Starry Skies. Personally, I've never seen a strike. I live in a sort of small town, but I've heard it's bad over there. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, our police also have a religious type following here in the US. It's gross. Yeah, absolutely, dude. Like, there is this like the police consider themselves this sort of sacrosanct organization, like that they are above it, you know, and that to me is very dangerous. That they consider themselves like a holy order of sorts, and you can see that with the way the police defend each other, right? That like it's the only union where if somebody breaks the law or acts out of step or something like this, there's like a wall of support. Like that doesn't happen in other unions. Like if a plumber beat a person to death with a wrench, the plumbers union wouldn't try to like do a big cover up on it and wouldn't try to like full scale support and all that kind of stuff. It's just the police, right? Thank you for the answer and the compliment. Well, Victor Beanblossom, if you're going to come in here with beautiful names like that, how could I possibly not? Have a good one, Sky. I hope you're doing well, bud. Hope you're doing well. Oh, man. Man, I'm feeling, I don't know. I'm feeling tired. Not tired. Tired's the wrong word, but just like, you know that kind of state of like when you've slept enough, but you're awake, and you know you can't go back to sleep because you've slept enough, but you wish you were asleep. You know what I mean? That's exactly where I'm at right now, where I just kind of wish I was in this like little cocoon of sleepy safety, just in bed, just like, maybe cozy. Maybe cozy is the word to use. That'd be nice. And hey, Victor, what with a question like that? Maybe you're my CIA agent, eh? Maybe you're coming in and asking, like, so do you think you have a dedicated CIA guy monitoring you? And you're saying it as the CIA guy, being like, titter, titter, titter. That's exactly the type of shit the CIA would do. I think one of the things that's wild about this whole moment is, like, when I was growing up, the people who were like, it's the CIA, man, they were always presented to me as these like kooky loser guys. They're like, it's the CIA, man, they're coming to get you. And now, like, I'm older and I'm like, nah, it's the CIA, man. Like, they're like a multi-billion-dollar terrorist organization, easily the largest terrorist organization on the planet. And the and this whole idea that we're supposed to somehow think that what they do is innocuous or something, it's just baby brained. It's just so baby brained. Like, even the CIA itself is making CIA propaganda about how evil it is. Recently on Netflix there was a show called The Recruit, and the entire show is just about how evil the CIA is. And like the whole the whole torture period during 2008, fucking what we know about the Church Commission, MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, Operation Mockingbird, right? They you've got to really turn your brain off to think the CIA is not involved in this shit. But that's basically what we do, right? The worship of ignorance. It's one of the pillars. Isaac says, I was at the airport in Los Angeles and I was struck to see people thanking a uniformed soldier for his service in Iraq. Yeah, I was wondering if these people know what we've done there. Oh, Anemone, like, share, subscribe, all that. Hit the bells, hit the whistles. Think about donating. If you're donating $1, maybe make it $2. And Victor says, exactly, bro. I'm so undercover, they aren't paying. Yeah, exactly. That's what I say when people say, like, you're just a Chinese operative. And it's like, yeah, dude. Like, that they're paying me in love and wishes, I guess. Dude, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to put up. I've been thinking, like, what should I show on the thing? You know what I want to do? I want to do a Chinese walk around. Yeah. Okay, guys, do we want a big city? Or do we want one of the more ancient places? I kind of want the big city. Turn that off. Don't need that. Yeah. I love showing the city walks of Chinese cities, dude. I feel like one of the things... Do the Ice City? Which one's the Ice City? Which one's the Ice City, Anemone? Do you know the name of it? I would love to... Haven't seen one of that city. You know what? I'm just gonna move on. I'm gonna stick with this one. I'm happy with this one. This place is crazy, dude. This is Chongqing, right? Absolutely beautiful. Oh, is this the name of it right here? Harbin? Okay, let's do Harbin. Let's see if I can find it. Chinese Harbin. Walking on Harbin. Okay. Harbin night walk. Let's do a night walk. Night walks are usually more impressive. Harbin is basically Little Russia in China. Well, how quaint. How lovely. I do know that China has built like replicas of cities. Like Paris. They built one of their cities is Paris, France. That they just built a replica of it. Including the Eiffel Tower and the whole thing. And I should do a walk around of that video one day. I think that what a phenomenal idea. What a phenomenal idea. Yeah, it is neat. It is neat. Like China went like this is what I keep saying about China, man. Like the if you experienced the shit that China was doing in your country, you would never shut up about it. You would always just be talking about how amazing it was. Like, look at how fucking amazing this shit. Oh, that's beautiful right there. I hope we get a real walkthrough of that with the trees, the walkthrough with the trees, and this arch right here is so beautiful. This is what I love doing when people. Oh, that's nice of them to even show us where this city is. That's nice. They usually don't do that. The uh, the reason why I love showing the walk around videos is that it really wow, Stalin Park, Soviet era landscape park with Russian era monuments. No kidding. I had no idea about this place. That's amazing. The I love showing these kinds of walk around videos because I do think that people can fall into kind of an abstraction when they think about another country. That that you are oftentimes when you're talking to a person about China or about any place, you can tell that what you are fighting against is their imagination, that their imagined version of what the place actually is. And their imagined version is usually like some shitty dystopia. Everything's in grayscale, right? It's all very like and oppressive and all of this kind of shit. And then you show these sorts of walk around videos, and it becomes like the thing that really I realized right away when I started watching these walk around videos was how normal everything looked. Like everybody just kind of looked normal. There's normal people milling about being normal. Like there's just like in a shopping mall and just like, oh yeah, hey, let's get this thing, and like they're looking at their phones, right? They're just like looking at stuff, and and then on top of that, like a lot of the architecture and everything is very beautiful, right? So there's a lot of beautiful architecture, and this beautiful architecture surrounded by people who are just living their lives and being normal, it really pierces through this sort of weird dystopian. The Chinese they're living in a dictatorship and all. It's like it's just hard to believe. It's hard to take seriously. And what is also very beautiful about exactly what you just said, Anemone, about it is sometimes you see like high modern societies and high modern cities with like places that are just like Times Square, and then sometimes you get like really lovely ancient towns that are like 2,000 years old and have just been maintained as they are. It's very beautiful. I'm Ian, by the way. I know quite a few Ians. Sorry, bud. Which Ian are we talking about? It makes perverse sense. How we need to be so propagandized in the U.S. to hate other parts of the world, lest we recognize how much better things could be, or at least different, right? Like forget about like the judgment value of better, right? Forget about this idea of like one over the other, but at least things could be different, right? And all of that flies in the face of what the actual prevailing ideology of the day is, which is that American capitalism is the end of history, right? They literally throughout the 80s and 90s were saying that this is the end of history, that we will never go beyond this. This is the best we will ever do. And just a simple walk around video of modern day China can show you like, well, okay, no, things can be different at least. Like we can make a determination about whether or not they're better or worse, but things could certainly be different. And if things can be different, then that sort of implies that this isn't the end of history, right? That we aren't at the end of history. That this is that you could have a different trajectory or a different period of growth. And that it's not scary. I think that's the biggest thing, is just this thing where it's not scary. Like, look at this video right now. Like, everyone looks completely fine. Like, everything looks normal. No one's like huddled around or anything. Everyone's wearing like normal clothing. They're not like wearing a singular uniform or something. Like everything looks pretty fucking normal. And because humans are humans and humans be like that. And I just think that so much of what happens in the conversation is couched in this kind of fear, this fear of the difference and the fear of the change and fear of an alternative place. But if you actually like spend even a moment walking around this place, and not even actually walking around it, but just like seeing a video of somebody walking around it, then you realize pretty fast, like what are we scared of here? What is it that I'm supposed to be afraid of? Like, the people who live there don't appear to be very afraid. Like, what's scary? I don't get it. Doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, I would love to go too, you know. There's so many wonderful things to see in China, you know. I know, right? Command Genius, I've had people say this to me too. I showed this to a neoliberal and they said it's a propaganda city to make the West like them more. Like, what an embarrassing thing to say. It's so embarrassing to say out loud, let alone think, that China has the power, the capacity to literally build an entire city and then populate it by actors so that they could do a video like this. Not just one video, but multiple videos. Like, it's so fucking brain dead. And the idea that someone would actually think this. Like, there just does come a point where we have to admit that our dedication to ignorance is backfiring on us in a big way. That there are simply consequences for having a population that's this stupid. Like, we really are going to face like enormous consequences for ensuring that we have a population that's this illiterate. Yeah, all to fool the center of the universe, the U.S. Exactly, dude. No, exactly. Like, why even bother? Like, why even bother? Like, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit about what the Americans think? China has secret Sigma Chad 5G matrix tech to distort reality. That's right. But communism always fails, guys. Ooh, I don't know what this name is. I'm just gonna call you I. Hope you're doing well out there, bud. We're already in the stage of a new beginning. The conditions for a new bifurcated global economy in the next decade, and the US dollar's leverage around the world is declining and will decline faster. Yeah. The end of history itself is over. Yep, I think that's absolutely true, bud. Like, we are... Like, Putin was absolutely right when he said that we're stepping into a multipolar world. And I really do think that the West declining to allow Russia into NATO and to allow Russia into the international system and its alienation of Russia is going to go down in history as one of the biggest errors in geopolitical history, perhaps. Like, we see this throughout history where empires do incredibly stupid things to undercut their own power and then collapse shortly thereafter. And I really do think that, like, the period of time where the Russians were trying to become part of the international rules order, trying to become part of the G7, what was called the G8 when they were temporarily there, trying to become part of NATO, like, that period of time is going to be seen as like this moment when things could have gone the other way for the United States and for the Western Empire generally. That the alienation of Russia is so mind-bogglingly stupid. Like, it is like mind-bogglingly stupid that they would alienate Russia the way that they did, because literally they just chased Russia into the hands of the Chinese, and it really is all so that America can be like, we're the top dog, we're the best, when they're fucking not at all, not even close. I really want to move to this city soon. It looks fucking beautiful. Yeah, it like the Chinese are not screwing around, man. Like they want their shit to look good. You know, I don't understand. Like, you don't need to create like a big economic argument for that. That's one of the things that I think so dumb about living in the modern era is that everything needs to be an economics argument. You need to convince somebody that it's worth having something from an economics perspective. When like sometimes it's just nice to have nice shit because shit is nice. Like things should be pretty and we should live in places that look good. You know, and like we should have libraries because books are good and we should have them. And like I don't need to create an economics argument for why that's an important thing. Although, if I were to create an economics argument, I would say having a literate intellectual population is going to mean that you're more resilient to grifters. And we're a society of grifters. We love grifters. I say this over and over and over again. It's probably my biggest talking point. That not only are we like full of grifters, we're surrounded by grifters constantly. We elect grifters to be the president of the United States. Like, so not only is everybody a fucking grifter, we love it. We love how many grifters there are. And we worship grifters. And we think grifters are the best. That it's like magicians, in a way. That, like, imagine a society where, like, magicians were the most sought-after sources of entertainment. The most sought-after people for us to all look at and be like, oh, wow, he did such a great trick. Right? And we were all like, oh, magicians and magic. That's the thing that we should base our society on. And we would build like monuments to magicians and have like big magic shows. And there'd be magic at the Super Bowl and magic at the Oval Office. And magicians would be everywhere. And everything would be about magic and how wonderful that is. Right? So that exact same idea, except it's grifters. Right? That it's just people who can con you the most effectively. And when you find out that it's a con, instead of being like, oh, we got to go get him, you're like, oh, wow, what a great con. Right? We got shows like Catch Me If You Can. Right? We got movies that are all based on this idea of watching a grifter grift people. And when they grift people cleverly, we go, oh, that was clever. Right? We love grifters. And we it's obviously the art form that has taken center stage in our culture is the ability to grift other people successfully. And the people who ascend to the very top, like you can see it most clearly with Elon Musk. Elon Musk is one of the greatest grifters that the world has ever seen. Like if I were to talk about what capitalist innovation looks like, you're taking a look at the grifter Elon Musk. He literally born a billionaire because his parents enslaved a bunch of people in apartheid South Africa, got a bunch of money from some fucking emerald mines, pulled that, gave it to him. He was born a billionaire, right? And then he bought up a bunch of assets, bought the rights to say that he made them, and then convinced everybody that he was a real life Tony Stark. Including being involved in the Marvel-verse and like going on shows and people being literally like, oh wow, it's super genius Elon Musk, when the guy's like a rich kid who doesn't know how to fucking run a goddamn thing. And like his whole empire is predicated on the idea that he's going to achieve a goal, and that goal will never be achieved. And the achieving of that goal is going to would happen so far in the future that he would be dead anyway. So he's just promising people like, yeah, sure, we'll get to Mars. Yeah, sure, we'll do a Hyperloop. Yeah, sure, electric cars will be all over the market. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure, we'll do all this kind of stuff. And it's all bullshit. It's all fucking bullshit. We're not going to Mars. Are you fucking kidding me? We're nowhere near smart enough to go to Mars. You think we're going to Mars you think we're going to terraform Mars while we literally de-terraform Earth? Like, no, that's fucking dumb. We're not doing any of that shit. And like, literally Hyperloop and Tesla and all this shit is getting blown out of the water by the Chinese, who are just literally building high-speed rail. And like, meanwhile, Musk is talking provinces and states like California out of doing high-speed rail so that they can like dig tunnels underground for cars. It's the dumbest shit of life. And everyone is going to look back on Elon Musk and be like, oh, this guy was always a grifter. And his whole purchasing of Twitter and then the collapse that's coming because of it, of Twitter, has just made it naked and obvious for anyone to see if you've got a fucking brain in your head. And But we love him anyway. We absolutely love him anyway. We still defend him. We still think he's the super genius. We still think he's super smart. When he's obviously the only skill he's bringing to the table is the immense wealth that his daddy gave him, and the fact that he's an overt liar that grifts everybody constantly. His entire life is a grift. Like, and we love it. Can we please do the apartment walk throw? They alone are like mega cool. I don't know what that is, Centaura. Just tell me what to search on YouTube and I'll do it, okay, bud? Because I'd like to see that too, but I don't want to spend a lot of time sifting around for it. Actually, now that I think about it, this is from Liga to see, it's likely the Sino-Soviet split, because they recalled all the Russian nationals, especially skilled technicians, from China. Oh, yeah. How the F we call it G7 when China is bigger than Europe combined and Russia is bigger than Germany, France, and England combined? Yeah. Yeah, dude. I don't know, dude. Yep. I know all about that, Diego. Good to see ya. Diego Alcazar. Wonderful name, bud. In my country of Chile, in 1973, 9/11, we got a fascist coup from the capitalist neoliberal dictator Pinochet, instigated by CIA, Operation Condor. Yeah. He made our military torture and kill our own people in stadiums. Yeah, absolutely. The Noam Chomsky has talked about the first 9/11, right? That's how he refers to it. And no, the Pinochet era is absolutely brutal. Economist Milton Friedman helped bring in that era, by the way. So if you're one of these Friedman stands, congratulations, your guy is like a Goebbels, essentially. Yeah, magic is real. To deny that is to deny science itself. I heard things like his Hyperloop idea was done so it could block some big mass transit thing some city in California was supposed to do. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. That if the city, like, if your whole thing is cars, mass transit's the last thing you want to see, right? So, especially mass transit that works and is effective, like the Chinese mass transit is. What an enormous project. That you want to talk about a unifying project. You want to talk about a project that's actually unifying a people and bringing them together. It's this mass transit shit, dude. Like, what China is doing is incredible. It's actually incredible. And Elon Musk is doing everything he can to get in the way of it. Because he's an enormous grifter who only cares about his own wealth and prestige. And all of his wealth and prestige is based on the promise that he'll deliver on something, and he never will. Like, he never will. Because that's how grifters work. Right? Like, he's the guy from that Simpsons episode, the monorail episode. Right? That he'll produce a bunch of Tesla cars. They'll all fucking blow up the way they do. But he'll be gone with the bag. So it doesn't fucking matter. I'm glad we live in the information age so we can see through clowns like Apartheid Clyde. Like, he's still one of the richest men in America, even though he had a big decline in his wealth because of the Twitter bullshit. But, like, you know, so what? Like, he had $100 million, or, $200 billion. If that gets knocked down to $50 billion, who gives a shit? Doesn't matter at all, right? Like, it's literally just, like, a waste of everyone's resources, time, and effort. Yarash Yapor. Sorry if I butchered that name, bud. I think this is your first comment. Hope you're here to be beautiful. If communism is the way to go, then why does no one say the Russian dream or the Chinese dream? Everyone says the American dream because America is heavily propagandized, dude. Because you have to sell something. Like, that's the reason why they call it the American dream, is because they have to propagandize you and sell you on something, right? The Russians and the Chinese don't need to call it the Russian and Chinese dream because they're not trying to sell you something. That, like, the reason they call it the American dream is because you have to be asleep to believe it. Yeah, because Hollywood, basically. Like, you don't need to sell people to breathe air. But if you canned air, you'd have to give them a nice little slogan and sell them on the idea that buying this can of air would be the way to go. This is a really nice city. What a beautiful little city you've shown me, Anemone, here. This is quite quaint. Quaint would be the word that I would use for this. And they've got it all lit up. This is so beautifully done. Yeah, Musk is a great example of how capitalism is absolutely not a meritocracy. Well, the whole meritocracy narrative that comes out of idiots like Peterson, it's falsifiable in 3 sentences. Like, literally. Not even 3 sentences. Like, if it's a meritocracy, then why are the people at the very top of it born into it? Like, there's the end of your fucking meritocracy argument. Like, the richest people, the richest person in Canada is named David Thompson. Literally, his official title is the 3rd Baron of Fleet. Recognized by the Canadian government, he's a literal baron, lives in Canada. His family emigrated from England as barons and came to Canada. David Thompson was born a billionaire, and his entire strategy is he doesn't own anything. He owns 10% of the shares of all businesses in Canada. And they call that, there's a phrase they use for this. But what it means is that so long as the Canadian economy keeps going up, his wealth will continue going up. So he's literally a worthless parasite, a literal worthless parasite that's just boiled onto the side of this country that he was just born into as a baron. But there's a meritocracy for sure. You just need to work hard. You'll ascend the ranks for sure. That's the way it works. The American dream propaganda from over 100 years ago still breathes, somehow despite its main audience being targeted by entire political parties. Yeah, I mean, like, the American dream idea, like, I mean, it is a nice idea, but it certainly wasn't American capitalism that got closest to it, right? It was the struggle of the labor unions, the struggle of socialists and communists actually fighting against the capitalist system, that forced it to actually put in place economic policies that would actually benefit the working class. That's when you got the closest to the American dream, right? It had nothing to do with capitalism. It's really weird watching capitalists try to take credit for the successes of socialists and communists. It's really strange to see. It requires a very dim view of the world. Oh yeah, I remember that Haban was also the largest population of Jewish diaspora in China for a time. But they left for Israel. Oh, very good. I do think that there probably was a certain percentage of Jewish diaspora that went to Israel on this sort of idea of like, oh, it's our own place, right? Who were probably just unaware of what was going on. I do believe there is a certain degree of that. But the Zionists are in control, so it's turned the whole place into a real fucking shit show. Isaac says, during the Chilean invasion, they arrested a protest music singer and they crushed his fingers with a hammer and gave him a guitar and asked him to play before they killed him. Yep. Fascists be fascists, dude. Just cruelty for the sake of cruelty. Arash, don't worry, you said my name nearly correctly. Okay, perfect. God help me, bud. I'm from rural Manitoba, so I'm trying. It's pronounced Arash. Arash. I'm from Iran. Very nice, Iran. I gotta tell you, Arash, congratulations on not collapsing to U.S. imperialism. Congratulations. Good for you guys. You did it. You did it. I mean, there's still time, but whatever you guys were doing to try to keep those borders strong, keep your people strong, good for you. Because fucking the stress of that must have been something else, dude. The stress of that, I wouldn't want to live in a country that was undergoing that shit. No doubt. No doubt. But if the imperialists had got into your borders, it would have been way worse. So I suspect that you're not happy with your government, but I wouldn't be happy with my government either. But at least they did their job. Oof. Before 1979, the Shah killed and jailed communists in Iran. Yep. Because the West loved him. We hate him as he's a dictator. Yet literally the only war Iran has fought in the last 200 years was because of the Shah. And the Shah was installed by the CIA. Like that, well, not directly installed, but like the CIA helped him out. And of course, yeah, of course you should hate him. I'm glad that you do. I'd be really disappointed, Arash, if you were in here from Iran telling me how great the Shah was. Ugh, fuck that guy. Dude, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you some questions about Iran then. Oh man, this is going to be great. What is going on with your leadership? There's the big protest movements, last I heard, about the protest movements against him that are coming out from the female population. That there's a real women's liberation movement going on there. I've seen lots of street movement and things like this. Is there any movement whatsoever that is actually interested in deposing or being rid of the right-wing theocracy that exists in Iran? Or is there any, like, what's the mood? I think that's kind of what I'm asking you. Like, what's the mood in Iran right now? Very curious to hear it from somebody from Iran. Liga to Z, my professor is my post-colonial studies course is Iran, and she went into a tangent about Iran's history and was almost in tears. Yeah, it's some fuck shit for sure. Diego, yeah, Victor Jara was the musician. He composed very beautiful songs about the oppressed. Chilean communists take a lot of pride on it, and he's one of the main communist heroes in our country. That's fucking beautiful, dude. That's actually real beautiful. I hope some beautiful stuff happens in Chile, man. Like, what a time. I know that the imperialists are still overthrowing places. Peru just had an overthrow recently. Looks like that one's actually going to stick, because I think the imperialists have a lot of mines. There's a lot of mining going on. Especially Canadian mines are especially important in Peru. So I think that they're not going to let that one go like they did in Bolivia, you know? But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Russia is not communist, and China is the #1 destination for scientists and the #1 destination for African international students. Yeah, I think that's going to be seen. That's going to be one of the great success stories of China. It looks to me like China is really dedicated to lifting Africa up. That they want to turn Africa into a major ally and trading partner. And it really looks like they are trying really hard to educate, create infrastructure, build trade alliances, build agreements. They want Africa to become a good friend of theirs. And it seems like everything that I've seen from China in regards to how it's dealing with Africa is exactly that. That they really are just like, we want to be good neighbors, and we want these guys to come into the world stage and to become their own power unto themselves, and we want to help them do that. And I think it's a real beautiful sentiment, and I wish them luck while they try. Arash says, firstly, most Iranians hate the West-backed Shah, yeah, as well as the current government. In short terms, the government forces religious ideology, yeah. No other religions are important other than Islam, yeah. I suspect that that's true. Like, I for sure say, oh, they kill and torture anyone who isn't Islamic. Deeply unfortunate to hear. We love that we are independent from the West, but we hate being under sanctions. Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. It seems to me like my outside perspective looking at Iran, it always seems that, like, when the wars began, when the invasion of Iraq happened, but even before that, right, there was Desert Storm and all of this, it seems to me like what happens to countries is that they pivot and they look at countries at the sections of their communities that are militant and heavily invested in the protection of their culture. And I think in Iran's case, and this is just my outside perspective, it just seems in Iran's case that that's the far-right theocracy, right? Like, who are the guys that are willing to kill people, and who are the guys who are willing to protect Iranian culture? Well, your far-right theocrats, right? And I just wonder if as Iran or as the United States begins to pull out of the Middle East because it's no longer getting anything valuable out of doing what it's doing there. If Iran begins to turn more away from that and begins to loosen up and liberalize a little bit. Yeah, of course it's unfair, dude. Absolutely. It's unfair that we're being sanctioned for defending ourselves by building weapons the West don't like. Obviously, human rights are important, but the fact that Iraq War, no West country helped you for sure. That's absolutely the truth, dude. Like, believe me, man, I'm no ally of Western imperialism, and so it seems to me like the best thing that, like, the best thing that's going to happen for Iran is when the dollar collapses and the United States sanctions are not going to be able to be withheld anymore, or they're not going to be able to hold on to them any longer because they're not going to matter anymore, right? Like, that seems to me like that's going to be the best thing to happen to Iran. This is how you can tell stuff is happening. Look to where the brains are going, where they are from, and where they go after that. Yeah, something to be said about that. Methane says, I remember years ago now, maybe a decade, the media here was all in hype about Iran's nuclear program and all that. And at the time I thought it was messed up. Pot, kettle, yeah. Compton says, in another universe, Gaddafi survives and unites Africa. South America expels all the saboteurs and does the same as Africa, and Russia didn't stop at Berlin. Yeah, we can dream. Diego, in Chile, we took a very big L since 60% of the people, 67% voted to not change the constitution of Pinochet. Mainstream media spread a lot of misinformation that convinced uninformed people, especially the very poor, to vote against it. The mainstream media is owned by Pinochetist groups since the coup that ended in 1991. Pinochetist elite controls many important corporations in our country, like media. I'm sorry to hear that, dude. That is a pretty big L. Like, I feel like countries are very, very shaky when it comes to changing the Constitution, and I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't the case. Like, it just seems to me like we should be more willing to mess with our Constitution than we are. Especially when you have a Constitution that was put in place by fucking Pinochet. You know? Seems to me like you would want to redress that and reopen it. And especially now, at this period of time in Chile's history. You know, like, I remember seeing the street movements when Chileans were holding up signs that were saying, neoliberalism was born in Chile, it will die in Chile. It's a very powerful statement, I thought. And it's disappointing to hear that the people of Chile have gone that way. 67%, you know, that's I think that's deeply unfortunate, but we learn slowly. Well, guys, I feel like we're getting at the end of this one. Oh, yeah. Arash, no one gave us missiles to defend our people in the Iraq War. Go read about Sardashut, German chemical bomb given to Iraq that killed innocent people in a small village. Just brutal. Just brutal, dude. I really do hope that places like Iran and honestly all of it, Afghanistan, Iraq, all of these places, I hope that they're able to reconstruct and rebuild after this imperialist project and after this imperialist period. Like, what a brutal, brutal period it has been for the Middle East. Just dealing with, like, Nazi-level fascists like George Bush, Dick Cheney, and then the subsequent leadership is not really much better, frankly. That the best thing that could happen for the Middle East is the Americans just getting out of there. Just get the fuck out. Stop involving yourself, and let these places build up. You know, let these places build up. Yeah, in Iran, we just want democracy, meaning every political party and person can voice their opinion without being jailed, killed, or tortured, from left wing to right wing. Everyone can have a say. That's sort of the dream, right? That's the dream of every country, to be able to live in a place where not only are you, like, not just voting for like a bourgeois democracy, but also actually having a say in what goes on in your workplace, what happens around you in your community. That's the hope, I think, for most people. It was a very obvious move in a change in constitution that was imposed during a dictatorship. But, well, most people are too lazy to have their own opinion and inform themselves. Well, I also think that, like, one of the things I think, Diego, that does happen is that the wealthy have such huge propaganda systems, and they have such enormous, large-scale, like, megaphones that they can shout, that people can be deceived into believing that that the general opinion of the populace is what this mainstream media is saying. Like, the example I always give is, like, if you look at a billboard and there's a stupid statement on it, one that doesn't make any sense, dogs are cats, something dumb, right? Well, your first instinct as a person is not to go, well, that's dumb. Because the guy beside you might go, no, it isn't. That's how it is. Dogs are cats. That's how. And then you're in a fight. And for all you know, you're in the minority of that opinion. And then suddenly now you're getting browbeaten and made fun of because you took a stand against that, right? And we all intrinsically know that this is the case. That you don't want to be in the minority opinion. You want to be in the majority opinion. And so you don't turn to the guy beside you and say, what a stupid thing. You say, what do you think about that? Oh, that's quite a thing, eh? And then the guy beside you looks back at you, and he thinks the exact same thing. He doesn't go to himself and say, yeah, that's stupid. He goes, well, yeah, there must be something to it. Oh, that's interesting. Isn't that a thing? Because you might turn around and say to him, no, dogs are cats. And then suddenly he's in an argument, and suddenly he's in a minority opinion. And then they both look at it, knowing that it's wrong, each of them believing that it's wrong, but they both agree to one another that it's right, because, well, there must be something to it. It's this huge sign, this huge billboard that's right in front of us. And this is how consent gets manufactured. And it takes somebody to stand up and say, like, that's fucking stupid. And to be willing to put themselves at risk. That other people will look at them and say, wow, what an idiot this guy is. Or that he'll be the object of ridicule. Or that he'll be in the minority opinion. For everybody to kind of coalesce and realize, oh yeah, it's pretty stupid, isn't it? This is the emperor has no clothes phenomenon. Right? That everyone can believe to themselves that the emperor is naked, but they'll never admit it because they think the guy beside them thinks that the emperor is clothed. And I've seen this over and over and over and over and over again. That you can talk to people on an individual level and you'll find out that, yeah, they think that that's stupid. But as a group, oh no, that's the way it is. There's a big billboard that says so. Until they're sure that the majority opinion is that the billboard is wrong. And I think that that's a phenomenon that happens a lot. And it turns out giving big megaphones to psychopaths is a bad idea. For exactly this reason. Yeah, it was a huge campaign of obvious misinformation, and the mass of people just followed along since it was repeated on TV. Yeah, people are too afraid not to fit in, right? People will go along with the most outrageous shit if it means they're in the majority, if it means that they're in the in group, and this is a very natural human thing, that people want to be on the in group. They don't want to be in the out group. And and people are willing to go along with lots of stupid shit. Like the Salem witch trials, I think, really came down to this. That there was a hysteria that took hold, and the group opinion was that there are witches, right? Like that a lot of Christian cults are like this. where it's like, yeah, Jesus Christ coming back at any moment. You got it. Any moment. Jesus Christ coming back any moment. That's what the in-group says. Like, so it's not that surprising. So what that means, though, is it means that for communists and for socialists, for people who are trying to push against this, that we have to remain vocal, we have to point the arrow at ourselves, and we have to put ourselves at risk. And we have to accept that we may end up as in the out group, because and get okay with what that means. Get okay with what it means to be in the out group, because because this phenomenon is persistent and constantly manipulated, and the only way to break through it is to be willing to tell the truth, to stand against the majority, to stand against the in-group, tell them the truth in the hope that they'll flip over to your side. And in the case of Western civilization, I don't see that happening until after the Great Disaster. I don't know what else to call it. Just the Great Disaster. The collapse of the dollar is just going to be, like, you want to talk about a world-shaping event? Like, the collapse of the dollar is going to be an enormous world-shaking event. Just hugely, and the consequences of it are going to be felt for 50 years. Like, we're going to constantly be talking about how, yeah, well, this was happening, and then the dollar collapsed, and now this is happening. And it's going to constantly be, it's going to be a historical benchmark. It's going to be like this flag in the sand moment, the collapse of the dollar. And we'll see how it goes from there. All right, guys, we've reached the end. We've reached the end of this one. I hope you're all doing really well out there. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel, revolt, repent. Good luck. We're going to need it. Nighty-night, TikTok.